Welcome to the night zone, hear the warriors speak. Life's the battlefield and we ain't feeling weak. From love to the game and the power we seek. Our voice is strong, breaking every peak. Talk of love and battle scars, everything that's real. From touchdown to sermon, you know the deal. Strength in every word we begin to reveal. Truth in every tale as our lives we unveil. Talk of love and battle scars, everything that's real. From touchdown to sermon, you know the deal. Strength in every word we begin to reveal. Truth in every tale as our lives we unveil. Protect and provide, we're knights in the fray. Nothing off limits, we got something to say. Life and love, fitness and fight all day. Guys Night Podcast, let's ride the way.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Guys Night Podcast. After a couple of weeks off, traveling Europe and Ireland, which we'll be talking about in a future episode, we have got an awesome episode tonight for you. So in my generation, you grew up on Fast and Furious, Gone in 60 Seconds, and everything in between. And if you were anywhere on the I-76 in Ohio in the early 2000s, you've probably heard of the Starboyz. So tonight we are fortunate enough to bring on the originator and co-founder, I believe is the way it's
Yes,
read,
sir.
Scott Caraboolad. So welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I am
Thanks
so
for the
pumped to
invite.
hear the story. And obviously the connection was made by Rich. So Rich, thanks again as always for bringing on a awesome guest.
You got it.
So a whole lot to go into and as far as where your journey's at now. But I think hearing how the Starboyz started is kind of, you know, where I wanted to get this episode cranked off. Because like I said, I went to high school at Cloverleaf. So 2000s when I graduated. And the talk of the town was always if you were on 76 and you came across the Starboyz, you were going to know it. And was that about when you guys got started or did it start before that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it started in the mid 90s is when I really kind of invested in perfecting the art of highway wheelies, right? And so, but it goes way back before that. And so my generation, it was Evel Knievel.
Sure.
And it was Dragway 42.
Yeah.
Right down the road, right?
Yeah.
So it was Dragway 42. It was when Evel Knievel was probably at the height of his success. I mean, he was the man. Like, if people in that time frame remember, like, he had the biggest semi in the world. He had the helicopter. He had his own personal helicopter. And it was, you know, for me, it was always about, like, I don't know, cartoons and superheroes were okay, but man, it was like when something was in front of me, that became like my superhero. So when I was 3 years old, just a little toddler, and it gives me the chills. Like, this is stuff that just was, you can't make it up. It was imprinted. You know, my dad rode a Harley, my uncle rode a Harley, and we piled into a old woody station wagon, you know, no seatbelts. And I just remember, like, you know, all the kids were in the station wagon and we were following my dad and the motorcycles out there, which was cool in itself, right? And, you know, I just idolized that whole kind of lifestyle. And just for me, like, there was nothing cooler than a guy on a bike, right? And of course, I had mini bikes and stuff back then. And, you know, we were going to Dragway 42 to see the man, right? And so, interestingly enough, it wasn't the jump that was captivating my senses at the time. It was the famous and notorious him standing on the seat with his cape flapping behind him,
Sure.
riding a wheelie down the track. And that's how he warmed up, right? And I was just like, whoa, I want to do that, you know? And I was only 3, so.
Now, was your dad into stunt riding at all?
No.
So he was like typical Harley cruiser with his gang on a Sunday, just riding. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my dad was a school teacher, so it was kind of like one of those, you know, mix where he wasn't full blown into like the Harley like lifestyle, like the kind of the outlaw lifestyle. He was more or less just loved to ride as well. But you know, went home and then everybody used to hang out in our garage, right? And I had this little toddler 4-wheeled kind of push thing, you know, and I just started balancing it out at 3. And the part that was probably interesting, and this is what makes or breaks a man, I believe, is I flipped it over backwards, conked my head, you know. And back then there was no safety devices or lawsuits, you know, and like nowadays they have really safety things on their all toddler vehicles or whatever. And you know, instead of just crying and running to mommy, I jumped back on that thing and just bleeding, and it was just like in my blood.
Right.
And so from that time forward, anything that I was on, I had to balance it out.
That's crazy.
Right.
I mean, that's where you start, right?
Yes.
So 3 years old, and you and I talked about it. Kind of started with dirt bikes first, right? Motorbikes. You said you had the old pull chain mini bike that weighed more than you did by like 10 times.
It would always break down. You know, just as you're starting to have fun, it would break down. You'd be like, oh no.
One of the welds would break after you hit like a 2-foot jump.
The clutch, you know, you'd lose the key. They had key pins back then. They would always blow those out. And so between the motorized mini bikes and pedal bikes, like I was off to the races even at a young age. I would jump off the porch onto a pedal bike that I couldn't touch the ground on. So I was always like driven, you know, in the extreme type of lifestyle. And so it started on, you know, the pedal bikes at first. I was the kid that could ride a whole block on the back wheel, you know, and then obviously started, you know, kind of incorporating that into the whole the motorized part of it. And, you know, then got big into dirt bikes and just kind of riding those. And it really, there was a time lapse, you know, in that early childhood to where, I guess when I bought my first sport bike when I was of age, that's when it really, you know, like from a dirt bike.
The limits changed.
Yeah, that's it. You know what I mean? So it was like, and what's the route right up here that we come up?
Route 3, right
76.
Here. Oh, 76 is the highway. Yeah.
That goes all the way through Seville.
Yeah.
Well, man, so we're around like a bunch of the history. Like I got a 900 double R, and back in the day, that was early 90s. It was like 93. Like that, it gives me the chills, man, because I remember specifically like these epic moments where, like, you know, that whole thought process from 3 is now fast forwarding to when I'm 17, 18 on a real big, you know, a sport bike. And
that's a big bike too.
Yeah.
We talked about my first bike was a 600, and my only bike was a 600. Like a 900 was like the next league.
It was when that bike came out. Like, if you know the history, and a lot of people don't, but the whole history of sport bikes kind of coming up is, you know, they weren't always around. But when the first full fairing bikes came out, it was like, that was huge.
Oh yeah.
Right. Especially for the younger generation. And then of course the timing with like Top Gun and Tom Cruise. Yeah. You know what I mean? Everybody went out and bought that Ninja, right?
Yep.
And so it was right on that highway there, 76 by Seville. Like that's where I caught it, you know, and it was something that the world never saw before. I mean, wheelies, you know, obviously were around for
sure
from the beginning of, you know, bikes in general, but to be able to like sustain it for as long as you want, like you just didn't see it.
Oh, of course.
So I remember like practicing on that road, and I was like, and you know, you're in the zone, but then you're striving to find that balance point, which obviously isn't easy, especially on a sport bike. You know, when you're going 100, like there's not much room for error there.
Well, I think that was what scared me away from sport bikes personally, was like, you know, wiping out on a dirt bike. Even if you're hitting like a double or a long tabletop, like it hurt.
Yes.
But you weren't going to slide 200 yards on your back.
And lose all that skin.
Exactly.
It's a cheese grater.
I remember when my dad and I went by my 600, I remember leaving and him going, don't be an idiot on the way home. I'm like, oh no, I'll be fine. I'm not going to do anything stupid. And I remember like gassing it at the first red light and like giving it a little bit too much and it like popping up off the ground real quick. And I was like, oh,
right.
That's awesome.
Right.
And then like the next exit, it's like a little bit longer, a little bit longer. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to hurt myself on this for sure.
I mean,
I kind of always gave myself that limit. I wasn't as ballsy as you were.
You were a smart one. You know what I mean? You were like, unfortunately, a lot of people don't know the limits on motorcycles, period. And that's why the statistics of death on those things is crazy. So, you know, you're facing that. We talked about that earlier. Just riding on the street in general is there's a lot, and the risk is there. But to do what we were doing, it's like taking it to a whole different level. But that was part of the attraction, right?
Of course.
That was like,
if you guys were just riding fast, like nobody been talking about the Starboyz,
right?
And for those that haven't heard, and this is their first time with any experience regarding the Starboyz, like it wasn't like just doing a wheelie down the road.
No.
Like, I mean, it was like legs spread out wide over the top of handlebars while doing a wheelie. Like
Yeah.
you guys really were, and it was on the streets.
Yes.
Like that, I would think that was the biggest thing about them, because like you talked about Evil Knievel, and there's a lot of guys out there doing stunts at that point in time, like Travis Pastrana on bikes.
Sure.
But they're doing it in an arena, they're doing it in a closed off area. Like you guys run I-76 and doing a $110 with your wheels above the handlebars, doing a wheelie like in between traffic. Like you never knew when you were like going from like Seville to the next up to Akron,
Right.
when a bike was gonna pass you with like the passenger like not even sure how
Right.
he was controlling the bike. Like it was nuts, man.
It was. And looking back on it, it's like, you know, how do you survive that? You know, and it's just definitely there was the hand of God was always looking after me, even though I was kind of just focused on being me and the ego,
Yeah.
and people like yourself like drove that.
Oh, of course.
You know, we were, you know, it was like a movie on the street. People would be pulling out like cameras or whatever back in the day, you know, or just tapping. They would follow us, and
Of course.
and so that you kind of, you know, you were driven off of that part as well.
Do you ever think like what it would have escalated to if we had the technology we do today? Like, you know, I was just talking, like my backpack can ride on a bike, and then there's like a selfie stick or a stick that you can like
Yes.
move around. Like, so now like you see all these guys on TikTok and stuff like that aren't even nearly as extreme as you guys, but they're going viral because of all the technology they have to kind of watch them do
Yes.
it. Could you imagine if you, because there wasn't any of that in
No.
2098.
And I think
I mean,
that
there
was-
wasn't cell phones back then. Like people might have been pulling out a Sony
No,
digital camera.
right. The
to
big
see-
soccer cameras is all really, you know, it was pagers if you were lucky to have a pager.
Right.
But, you know, the whole looking back once again on the success and how quickly it fought, you know, it caught fire was because there was none of that. There was no competition. You know what I
Right.
mean? There wasn't a rush because we were the ones that were, and like I said, there was guys riding wheelies, but it was full leather, full protection on a closed track. And so what
Not
a lot-
shorts and a t-shirt.
No, well, and that's the formula. A lot of other stunt riders coming up trying to imitate didn't understand. Even when we started going over to Europe, there was some of the best stunt riders in the world over there on closed tracks. But we would go over there, and they would almost like hodgepodge. They'd be like boo-hooing us
Of course.
because they didn't understand. Even one of them, I remember, is like he was upset, like we were getting all the attention. And I said, "Listen, buddy, it's not just about the bikes.
Yeah.
It's the lifestyle, right?" And then the other thing that was sparking the interest around the world was it was obtainable to anyone that had a bike. You didn't need, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
somebody that just rode, and you'll hear that from all the second gen that came from watching our original videos, are like, I never thought about that. You know what I mean? I can do this. So you know, you don't need any. Well, you should have stuff, but you know, it was the whole, you know, thing off the bike that really kind of set us apart from everybody.
Well, and I talked about it too in the intro. I mean, that also was all occurring back when it was, you know, Gone in 60 Seconds, or then it was, you know, the Fast and the Furious movies were coming out. And then they did the one where it was on bikes.
Yeah, the bike
with
yes.
Ice Cube.
Yes, there was a bunch. There
and
was a
then
handful.
Yeah, and then they have triple. They had like all these different things that were coming out. Like it was really, it's kind of weird. You guys almost really started a wave of a generation in the sense of where it became about sport bikes and doing stuff that was just unheard of on a bike,
Correct.
on the streets. And then, like you said, there's a way, and we're gonna get into this next part, but there's a way of life that goes along with that, right?
Sure.
Like it wasn't like you guys rode like crazy and then went home and had tea and crumpets at
Right.
the end of the day,
Right? No.
So, I guess let's talk about that aspect of it. I mean, because now you do something a little bit different, but what was the lifestyle like at that point in time? Like, how were you guys funding your adventures? You talked about going
Sure.
to Europe and stuff like that. Were you guys getting sponsorships,
Sure.
money, things like that? How did that work?
Well, you know, the other thing to keep in mind is we were young. Like I was in, you know, there was a lot of other stuff like in the home life that was starting to go down that kind of fueled my rebellion and fueled the rebellion on what we were doing. It was, you know, it was getting pretty intense really quick. So, you know, when I started learning how to balance and go for miles on these roads over here, there was a couple other guys from Akron that we'd all just gather around, and there was a few that were able to keep up that intensity. And I was going to Akron U at the time, and we had those, I'm like, I had this inside drive to kind of like, okay, we have something. I had a good business sense back then. And so I said, let's record this stuff. But there was no internet. It was all VHS. Like the cameras that we were recording with, like I laugh about it now. Like we were taping those things to the top of our helmets. And so
you're welcome, GoPro.
Yeah. So whoever got a chance to wear that would have whiplash for the next couple of days, right? So, when you start looking for volunteers, they're like, no, I'm good. But anyways, we just threw together some videotape from, the old soccer mom cameras. And I went down to the audio visual at Akron U, and I said, hey, listen, I got a bunch of footage. I had some music, and, can you throw this together for us? Because even like editing back then, it's not like today. You had to go to an edit studio. It was a big project, and not everybody was able to do. Nobody was able to do it.
Well, I was going to say, just even back then, like if you wanted to record one VHS to another, it was like a $900 machine to do it.
It
so,
was.
Yeah,
I mean, it was pretty crazy. But I knew we had something there. And originally, the concept of putting a video together was more of a bar bet thing, interestingly enough.
Really?
Because, we were young, always going out to the bars and the college bars, and you'd tell people, or people would be like, oh my gosh, I saw you. And people were like, there's no way. And so, I started thinking like, okay, and every bar had a old school big screen TV. So we cut that, and that was where we really started peddling and selling those things. Like we started going into and now it was like this business venture, not just going into the bar to party, but it was like, man, we can make some money off this. So we would take backpacks filled with these VHS tapes, and back then, even to get dubbed, they were like, it was like $10 a piece just to get it transferred to a VHS tape back then. And so, it had this little generic sticker on it, and we started peddling those in the bars, and then there was not international, but a expo that was run around like a lot of the bigger states in America. One was going through Cleveland. I was working at a motorcycle shop, State 8, where you mentioned.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't know you worked there too.
Yeah,
okay.
That was one of my 9 jobs I had while I was going to school.
In order to fund the motorcycles?
Right.
Because they do break when you ride them like that.
They're expensive. And so, I kind of took the whole, like, okay, selling bikes, selling parts at these expos. Thousands of people are going in there in the weekend. And literally, that was another part of the master plan to market ourselves, was the way that we looked, right? How could we separate ourselves from the average motorcycle rider? And a lot of people get super dressed up, and we started dyeing our hair crazy and fur pants and just like these. But we would walk in, and so people would, oh, those are the Starboyz. And we went to that first expo, and it's crazy. Like we got
at this point, real quick, before you guys, the first expo. Hold on one second. Oh my God, hold on a minute. All right, we're back. So hopefully the first 20 minutes doesn't look like absolute dog crap after the wrong cable. I mean, that's the thing when it happens, when you pack everything up to go overseas, and then you bring it
Never
back.
Unplug that one cable.
Yeah, that one cable needs to stay right there. And I'm about to order
color coded. You need to color code that right there, man.
That thing's about to get duplicated.
Make
Amazon's going to send me about 20 of those tomorrow morning. All right, so I'm trying to think where we left off. We started talking about the life, right? Because there's
and how it got started.
There's you get started, you start selling $10 VHSs out of the back of a book bag. That's hilarious. Because that just kind of goes back to like that time period. We talked about how difficult it was to actually shoot the footage.
Yes.
But then we got started with the life. Like then you guys kind of, how many of you guys were there when it became the Starboyz, in the sense of like, we're creating a brand, we're wearing goofy shirts, we're wearing furry pants.
Yeah. So after that first expo that we hit in Cleveland,
and what in an expo, as far as like
it's an international motorcycle show is what it was.
Okay.
So the thing about that is there was probably 7 locations around America that they would host that at. So if you were on the outskirts of one, you would come to it.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't just local. So the attention that we got when we walked in there and went to every booth that had a TV with a VHS, they said, hey, you want to increase, and we were cocky about it because we knew what we had. We said, if you want to increase your traffic, put this in. And they put it in, and it was crazy. Like it was like a magnet. Like it's another chill moment, right? Like I remember that.
Remember, like going up to these guys, like, no, trust me, your booth will be packed if you play this tape.
And it was like they started playing that, and it would be not just 3 people watching it. There'd be 30, 40 trying to see, and then we would be in the back with the backpacks, 20, 20, 20, 20, and we had a runner. Because we didn't have, we didn't buy a booth space or anything like that. Eventually the people that ran it, we became friends with, but they were trying to chase us out, right? Because they knew we were making money in their expo and we didn't get the proper whatever. So we had a runner going back to our truck with and filling up our backpacks, and it was just 3 days. You're selling thousands of them.
Wow.
Right. And so those weren't just going to Cleveland.
Right.
They were going to all, a widespread area around. And so.
Yeah. And then it's like the 20-year-old kid sitting at home is like, dude, you guys got to come see this. Or the high school kid.
It became a party video.
Right.
Anybody that had a house party, they would put that in.
Well, I was going to say nowadays it's like common, like even at my gym and things like that. Like there's always like a video of like motocross or enduro or something. Like I could just imagine like going to a bar or even especially at like motorcycle shops like Roush and all that, like them just having that playing on like repeat because
it was, once again, there wasn't that much extreme stuff out there. You're still talking like almost the conception of cable TV back then. So, it's not like you can dial stuff in now. Like this was just, once in a lifetime. And the crazy part about it is local news picked it up. And
really?
And so
like the tape or just you guys in general?
They picked up the tape, but it wasn't in a good way. Right. But, and we get a call, and I won't mention the station, but, we get a call and we're thinking it was going to be good. Hey, we want to come down and interview you. And, we were young and dumb and we're like, okay, and they came in, it was like, with a bouquet and this and that, and not really, but we did this interview and we thought we were like on top of the world. But then a week later, like we started seeing the pre-commercials to the news. And it was like, these guys are basically, they're saying, are threatening your lives on the highway, which was semi-true.
Sure.
But what they failed to realize is that and it ended up being like a 3-part news segment. So it wasn't just a one night thing, but it got so big. And once again, there was no internet or nothing. It went on the national wire because the story was so big. So not just Cleveland was airing that newscast, it went all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. So like, once again, it was the chills. We were calling lawyers, like we were like, because they flipped the script on us.
Of course.
Rightfully so. But then in the back, they just gave us this attention. So
I was saying no publicity is bad publicity. That's like a prime example.
Definitely true. So suddenly we started getting calls from all over the country, and I was still working at that motorcycle shop, like you had mentioned before. The backcountry MX stuff was starting to take off,
right? And
there was two distribution centers out of California. And I looked them up and I got their address. I wrote a little note. I said, hey, I got this thing. It's never been seen before. And I don't think anybody's doing this anywhere in the world. I sent 2 copies to each one of them. And I watched the tracking. Like it arrived like whatever, Wednesday at 3:00. By 3:30, they didn't even finish watching the video. We start getting calls from both of them wanting to buy the rights and pay us royalties.
Really?
And I'm working at a motorcycle shop. I remember I was like, let me get back to you. I hang up the phone. I call my dudes that were, the core guys from the Starboyz.
So how many was the core guys?
There was only 3 of us.
3 were the core.
There was a lot of us, but we had to, and of course, as you can imagine, there was a lot of hurt people.
Of course.
But it's just at the end of it, I knew we couldn't feed all those mouths. But then also I was looking at the talent. Who could we do without to continue this tape? And so it narrowed us down to 3 of us that were the core talent.
Right.
And,
and I'm sure like there's benefits to the crew riding with you. It's not like you were letting them starve.
Correct.
Right? Like you're doing stuff.
I mean,
for them
and that was, it was.
But when you come into a business, especially when you start developing an LLC and things like that, like you can't have like a 45-person partnership.
And that's what we had to do.
Next week, somebody won't show, then they won't want to go there. Then they dip out.
There's too many chiefs.
Yeah.
So, and I knew that, just from having the sense of, being kind of like an entrepreneur. I was running my own lawnmower business and stuff back then, but that was one of my 9 jobs. But anyways, we had to go, okay, this is getting real. We had to go get incorporated, and that's when it narrowed it down. Okay, there's 3 of us, and we're just going to draft it up, and the other guys are just going to have to live with it. So, once we signed that deal with Impact Video, it was like, quit school, quit the jobs, and starting to get these royalty checks in the mail. It was like,
when you were getting royalty checks, because I mean, this was probably around 99, 2000.
Yes, yeah. It was
so what kind of check were you looking at back then on a royalty check, if you don't mind sharing?
It started with thousands, and then thousands came in a month, and then it started as they started getting this video out from their point into their distributors, and it went to tens of thousands. You know what I mean? Then it started just climbing, and I was like, okay, we got to work on the second video.
Is this all just the original tape of like you guys having it dubbed and edited in a fucking back room?
It all came
so
from.
This isn't like this isn't
cover.
Like right. There's not even like a
there's
production.
No artwork. We didn't even have a logo. We had nothing. All we had was this crude soccer mom videotape and this crazy horrible music in the background, but it didn't matter, man. It was just people were captivated because nobody ever saw anything like it. So then we started like coming up with a like everything was just kind of blossoming overnight, and we're kind of like rushing to get this thing packaged. And then of course part of the deal with that distribution house was they helped us with, we still owned the rights to it, but they owned the distribution rights to it. And then we still had the right to sell it ourselves, right? So, it just kind of it took off like, an American dream. At one point, I went to the business department at Akron U to sit down with them because I was always looking for, okay, we know we got something. How can we maximize this? And they said, it was chilling. They said, this is 1 in a billion chance that you guys just struck this pot of gold.
Really?
We could, you can't formulate it.
Right.
And it was because of it was the timing.
I mean, it was viral before viral was
correct.
A thing.
It was reality before reality TV too,
Yeah.
because it wasn't just, once again, it wasn't just the writing. We tried to capture the personality, even though the personalities were hanging out in bars and getting crazy, but that was the attraction, right?
Sure.
Who can be, is like even the whole Jackass thing. It was pre that.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff we were just doing stupid things. And
well, it's funny because as you're talking like this, and we talked about those movies and stuff for a big time, it's like I remember there was like this scene in the one Fast and the Furious where like all the kids want this because Toretto uses
yes.
this. So like I can just imagine, because you were working for State Aid, is people coming in there and being like, we want the bikes that they're riding.
Yes.
We want the gear that they're
well,
and
that
with.
was
like,
and that was
what are they doing to their bikes? Like we want the same.
That was an entranceway to sponsorship, right? So it's just like everything just started coming in. You have the product, you have what people want, you're riding the things, you're wearing the things, and so I started calling up, hey, you know what I mean, like. And so at the beginning, because there was that outlaw part of us,
people didn't want to touch it.
Well, they still touched it because it was like the guerrilla tomorrow. We'll give you this around the back end.
Gotcha, yeah.
And we were able to still use logos and stuff, but some of them were protective. But then, we started immediately working on a higher quality production. And so when the second video came out, like early, it was probably filmed 99, 2000. I think we released it in 2001. We had hired helicopters. We were going down to Miami, to the Florida Keys, and there was shots.
He's just thinking about
oh gosh, it was just like, and it takes me back, like, because I remember like, okay, we're gonna, and obviously everybody watches movies, and you kind of base things off of that. Like, let's get some great background footage, right? So there's let's get
the ocean in the background.
We did the 7 Mile bridge down in the Florida Keys. Like to this day, that's probably one of the most notorious shots in the industry that was ever taken. People are just like, what? And we had a helicopter. They would tape the back numbers. I mean, they were going outlaw to film it because and they're like floating, right beside us. And it wasn't like, we weren't shutting this down.
Right.
And so true stories behind it that a lot of people didn't know is like, we were actually escorted out of Key West because they figured, I mean, we're shutting down the 1-lane bridge that accesses the Keys because we're riding wheelies. And we got helicopters. There was another helicopter that just joined that we became friends with. They were like, they weren't even the ones we paid, but they started filming us. They were down there filming Formula, race boats and stuff. And so we had 2 helicopters beside the bridge, like almost touching the bridge and just following us over the bridge.
How old are you at this time? At this point,
I was
what?
still in my like early 20s.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Like, what more at that point in life? You're like, this is it.
It was crazy. And even then, like, I was so focused on the business end of it. Like, and yeah, we still partied and stuff, but it was, you know, it was still controllable. But, you know, it was just like that whole American type of more. And even thinking production, like, how can we make it more outrageous? More like, because the appeal was the danger, it was the lifestyle. So,
yeah, because you didn't shut down that bridge. So there's traffic on it.
There was. And the traffic was waiting, but I remember like, and the police were actually cool about it because they actually kind of like were on both sides of the bridge waiting for us. By the time we came back, we only got to make one run, man. Like there was probably 100 phone calls to the, you know, and it's not a big city, like you're on the islands, right? So they were kind of, when we went over and came back, like, you know, we always had our signals and our pre-helicopter kind of like, time to go, bro. We'll meet you back in Miami. And so anyways, there was like a whole swarm of the, you know, the police waiting for us. And they never actually even pulled us over or anything, but they got in front of us and behind us, and they escorted us all the way out the Keys until we got to southern parts of Miami.
You added that to the video, I hope.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, well, there was no footage of it because there were the only people that were filming with the helicopter.
Like, damn, I wish we would have had those duct taped cameras.
I know. And there was no GoPro or anything like that. And at that point, like you can imagine though, like us, like we knew this was going to be risky. We didn't have no permits, you know, so it was like even just to focus and not be like too anxious to be able to ride a wheelie. You know, stuff's gonna. I knew. You know what I mean? It was just a matter, you knew no matter where you were filming, there was only a short time span before local police are swarming around you. And we had run into that issue with the first video, right? So, you know, it was just kind of escorted us out, but we got the footage and, you know, we cut the production, we hired a production company to, you know, we started upgrading everything. And as we know in history, it was, you know, early 2000s now when the internet was starting to come about. And it's crazy looking back at that. www. It was like, that's not going to work. You know what I mean? That's not going to, but it's still me. I'm like, it might. So we started a website and then the DVD era came through. I remember the first time we were still traveling those circuits. Now we weren't just doing Cleveland. We were doing Chicago, New York City, you know, over on the West Coast, we were traveling around, and by that time, it was just like, it was crazy. Like our booth, we would just have to get a 10 by 10 booth, and literally, I wish I had pictures of that. We would order tens of thousands of the videos. So we would go in there with these, we called them the gold bars, right? These boxes of VHS, and our whole booth would just, we made couches to sit on out of our boxes, right? So Friday would open, and then the three of us would just be there with like, you know, 20 for 3 days straight.
Jesus.
Right? And then some guy, we were in New York City, he's like, you have a DVD? I'm like, what? I remember saying that. I'm like, what's DVD, right? Like, and I had obviously heard about it, but it was still just kind of like new technology.
Right.
And so, you know, it was actually cool because then we started popping out DVDs and we just resold the first two just as much because everybody wanted the DVD, you know?
Right.
And so once again, then we you know, it was probably the second video that we made in early 2000 that really opened up the gateway to the sponsorships and stuff like that. And then, you know, once you have that talent, you have that appeal, then we started getting phone calls. Hey, will you do a show? Right. So, and then once we started putting 2 and 2 together, it was like, that's when I went out and started looking for sponsorships. And, you know, at that point, it just went like from 2000 to 2006, like we were pulling in tons of money, man.
That's
Just
incredible.
tons.
Because
Right.
it's interesting because I looked at it from a local level, obviously, but to hear the success you guys had nationally, and I would imagine back then, like I said, and all this, I mean, that era was really crazed around going fast.
Yeah.
Early 2000s in every aspect of things.
Yeah.
So it's like to hear that you guys really kind of took it by storm, like you were your own thing.
And
you
once
know?
again, even the economy back then was flourishing,
Yeah.
right? Like everybody had that, you know, that spare. And then of course, like, okay, oh, what else can we add to this? Then we started a whole clothing line.
I was
you know
gonna
what
say,
mean?
did you guys have like a merch like
Oh
line?
yeah. Within even like our website, it was like like it's just crazy explaining it to my kids now. Like we didn't have this, you know, we had one of the first forums. It was the forum that was on the web that people can start like chatting back and
Oh,
forth.
yeah.
So there, like our forum and our website at one point, like one of the clothing sponsors that sponsored us, I didn't even know how to look into stats and stuff. He said, "Do you know like your website is one of the top motorcycle websites in the world?"
Really?
Right. Right. And so then we set up a shopping cart on the website, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now between the distribution of the company that was helping us and our own website and, you know, the World Wide Web, it was starting to go worldwide over. So it went national, then it went worldwide. And now you got it going to Australia, New Zealand, you know, like Iceland. Like we had I still remember some of the guys that we deal with. The Iceman was in Iceland. Like, and some of those smaller countries were like just even more hungry than America, like for our products.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
That's awesome that you guys got to really travel around the world. So, do you guys is there still stuff up from the Starboyz?
You look up Starboyz and there's stuff still around, you know what I mean? But once again, it's just I guess the business side started. Once you start like having that kind of income stream, you kind of take things for granted, you know, and you're starting to get tons of money and you're just starting to travel a lot. So, you know, you just kind of start losing your sense of balance, I guess. And that's kind of when things started getting a little out of control. You know, well,
because it's at that point, 3 of you guys are getting all the proceeds, essentially,
Yes.
which I'm sure you're putting a ton of that back into, whether it's your bikes or different things like that and travel and stuff like
Yes.
that. But a lot of that stuff sponsors are taking care of too. So if you don't mind, do you know what like the peak of your guys' time, what you guys were bringing in? Like
millions.
Millions.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
From riding bikes.
From riding
Crazy.
motorcycles. Yes.
I
mean, we were sponsored by, you know, Suzuki in America. American Suzuki was sponsoring us, giving us bikes. And over, like I said, in England, we were sponsored by Honda over there, which never really made sense to me. But
yeah,
you know,
right.
And then, you know, it was just a matter of we were starting to obviously have this performance aspect of us to where we were able to do it not just on highways. We were doing, like I said, you know, we were in Edinburgh, Scotland, doing some of the biggest motorcycle shows in the world. Now we're getting invites to those places.
That's crazy.
And, you know, in the background also was running the magazine coverage because, once again, there was no social media. So, you know, magazines from all over the world in different languages were wanting to come in. Yeah, so like
that.
You know, they would fly into America and catch us at a bike week or something like that, or a big event, and they would follow us around. We would take them on the highway, and even those guys, I remember to this day, some of those writers were, you know, they're used to. A lot of the other countries are really motorcycle driven,
right?
And more so for transportation. You know, even like England, everybody had, you know,
England, Italy, they're all on even scooters at the least.
Ireland, Scotland, like, and so anyways, they just have more of an appreciation for motorsports. Not that the Americans don't, but over there,
but even now you
lifestyle.
look at like enduro races. The best
Yes.
enduro races are over there still.
Yeah.
And it's. I was just looking that up before you came on actually because I was just curious because like we talked about that time frame and that generation. I felt like my dad rode. That's what got me into dirt bikes. Like I remember my first time hopping on a bike was him holding the handlebars while I accidentally punched the gas on a CR 500 and that thing was like, "Brrr!"
Yeah, you don't punch the gas on a 500. No,
but it's like, you know, I feel like dirt bikes now it's side by sides. Now it's like Billy Bob and his 400 pounds sitting in the front seat with the windows tied up and everything going on. Like we just go down to West Virginia or we were up in Michigan riding and it's like everybody's in a side by side. There was only like now this time we went to Michigan and great for dirt bike riding. There was like 7 of us that were riding and on bikes, but it's like kids don't get their first four-wheeler anymore. Now they get a PlayStation 5 or a $2,000 computer.
They play AT the video dirt bike games and sport bike games, right? So
and it's like, man, it's like what a great time because were you guys doing some wild, crazy stuff? Sure, did it escalate, but at the same point in time, like I mean, you guys were out riding at 16, 15, 14 years old instead of getting into doing all the other stuff. So,
yeah.
but
Then we got into the other stuff,
Yeah, I was
which
gonna say,
was ironic, right? You know.
So let's get into that because obviously when you're bringing in millions of dollars, you're living this crazy fast paced lifestyle. You're traveling all over the world. You're 22 years old. Like everything becomes an extreme, I would have mentioned.
Yes.
And you know, it's funny because you mentioned at 3 years old, you were always trying to find that balance in anything that you rode. But apparently there became a time where like the riding and the lifestyle didn't balance
Clashed.
anymore.
Yes.
You weren't
and so that goes
balancing
back to, you know, and this is something I think anybody can relate to. There was some trauma in my life, and we were talking about it earlier, where I watched my dad die when I was in my teens. And so that was always running in the back of my head, right? Like just trying to figure out like, okay, like, you know, everything's fine and dandy. I had a blessed childhood. Obviously my dad was a big influence in my life. He was my true superhero. Evel Knievel was second, you know? And so so to lose the superhero and watch him die at 43, it was very traumatic, right? And it was kind of when I first started coming into riding, but I wasn't pushing it to the point where obviously it was like the Starboyz stuff that we're talking about. So there was this hole inside of me going through that trauma. And after he had died and I watched that go down, like it was crazy. It was like a war. And I started developing post-traumatic stress disorder, and I didn't know that I was developing it. And so I was trying to cope with that loss and that emptiness. And then also with my faith. Like there was a time when, you know, shortly after my dad had died, like I could not snap out of it, man. You know what I mean? I could not, no matter what. And he had an office and a study, and he was very educated. And I was up in there for days just crying, and people were trying to talk. I'm just like, leave me alone, leave me alone. You don't understand. Oh, I lost my dad. I'm like, your dad wasn't my dad. Like the relationship I had with him, not that you didn't have a great dad, but you know, people just want to give you an answer to get through it. And sometimes you need to be able to tackle that. I didn't know how to tackle it at the time. So I parked it in the back of my mind. And at that point, like there was a definitive moment where I looked up, and whatever understanding I had of God, you know, I wasn't having anything to do with him. I'm like,
Sure.
I'm done with you. And it wasn't just the impact on my life. And then the next 4 years, there was 9 other family members, and 2 of my mom's best friends that died. And I was watching my mom go through this. I'm like, what kind of God would let this happen? Not just to me, but it was just like this dark time, you know, going from a great part to overnight, just this darkness for like 4 years. But I was still functioning, still going to school, still working the 30 jobs. And obviously, you know, in the back of my mind, still, you know, honing my skills on a motorcycle. But so I just kind of focused on the Miami. I joke around. I said I focused on the Miami Vice lifestyle. I wasn't going to believe in anything that I couldn't see, touch, feel, or smell that wasn't right in front of me. And I also was very driven, very extreme, obviously. And I was going to go after what I wanted. Right. And I was going to get it at any cost. And obviously, when I start telling these Starboyz stories, like, you know, I had a pretty big set of balls on me. Like, just, you don't just roll around like you know, doing what we're doing, knowing that there's that threat. Even like that story about the bridge. We knew that we were going to get in trouble. We knew that the potential was jail, to get arrested. You know what I mean? But we were getting rewarded on the back end because we were making a living off of it, and we were making a great living off of it. So it was like, you know, it was the famous Popeye cartoon where the devil's on one shoulder and the angel's on the other. Which one are you going to listen to?
Yeah, right.
And I was listening to, I didn't know it, but I was listening to the devil. Just go get it, Scotty, and you're going to win. And
well,
I
you're
thought
being
I was
encouraged too, right? Like, I mean, you talk about the money, the sponsorships, like everything's out there. Like you're getting that celebrity status.
Yes.
Like you're going to a motorcycle show and people are there to see you.
Yes.
You know, nowadays they'd probably have you in a booth all day so you could sign autographs.
We did that. Well, we were doing that, you know, so, you know, those expos and just going out of the country and doing these huge motorcycle events, you know, after and that's the part that started to catch up, like that fame, you know, it gets to you. Like, who doesn't want it? Or, you know, at least you think that's going to fill you with whatever's missing. You know, you think money's going to do it. You think the fame's going to do it. Another magazine, that'll make you, you know, have that peace that you once lost.
Well, so I wanted to ask you about that real quick too, because we talk about how like fast paced it is as you're building this business. Like, I mean, one, you're doing it by yourself. I mean, you and 3 guys or 2 other guys are doing this, but you're like essentially doing stuff without a book. It's not like today's day and age where like, oh, you just go here, go to Daddy, and you create a website in 5 minutes. Oh, you go to this, and you can set up a clothing line in 5 minutes.
Right.
You know, you guys are hustling for all of that. You're making the phone calls.
It was a hustle.
You talk about watching the getting notified when they picked up the tape so that you can expect the call and all these different things. So like your mind is constantly focused. But I was going to ask, after that second tape, when you're talking about bringing in millions of dollars at that point, did you guys do a third tape or no?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you did do additional tape.
It
I was going to say,
yeah.
Was there a point where you spent more time in the lifestyle that was like the drinking, the partying, the out late at night than you were actually making the content anymore?
Because the lies that the devil was putting in my head, that success, the money, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll were going to be what fulfilled me and filled that hole. The more that I started to gain in the world, the more success. Guess what? It wasn't working. It may seem to have been working on the outside in the worldly perspective, and having all your needs met and the bank accounts and the money. But I often talk about, like, the more that I gained, the darker my soul became.
Yeah.
And it was just, I compare it to like digging a hole. Like it was just such a strange feeling. Like, okay, and this isn't working. Am I crazy? You know what I mean? And I was never really addressing where it was stemming from.
Well,
So-
it's one of those things where I respect somebody who stays kind of grounded when they start to get that fame because, like you said, it gets to the point. I would think that it would get to that point where it's like, okay, well, all the stuff that got, like, your days were filled trying to do all these different things before it was really possible. Now you're at that point where you've met that star status, and you got people that want to produce for you. You got people that want to do the videos for you, sponsors that want to give you new bikes. Like that first tape, if you wrecked a bike, it wasn't like somebody was giving you a new one. Like you had to go work 8 jobs to do it. So like, I would think that your mind was always constantly focused on what you need to do next in order to keep reaching that goal. But at some point in time, you have to do so much less, and there's so much more of the other stuff that that's where that comes back to, like, all that stuff you put to the back burner, I would think is like starting to come up because
of course,
you have less stuff filling up that focus. Maybe
talk about peace and freedom, especially what I do now, and it's just that I think is something: peace, freedom, and true love. And it's like, even what we're doing now in the prisons, it's like I always talk about freedom, and they think I'm talking about freedom from the walls around them, and it's the freedom up here that I started to lose. And when you think, you've been promised in the back of your head or from the voices that are lies that this is going to be the solution, and it's not the solution, then you start thinking that something's truly wrong with you. So then I checked in with doctors, right? And this is my story, and once again, like, it's how it flows, but the doctors, and I'm the one that stepped into it, but I was like, okay, all my needs are met. I'm living in the American dream, and I'm miserable. There's this darkness. I can't sleep. Like I can't enjoy the things that I have. And when you aren't able to enjoy the things you have, and you think the solution is you need more, like, it's just a matter of time before you start going insane. And it's just a matter of time before you start becoming exhausted.
You started losing your identity, didn't you? Because if I remember, didn't you, with an entrepreneur mind, didn't you like kind of split into a plan B and open a nightclub? And
we did everything.
Yeah. That's where things started to go real wrong for you, right? Yeah. You had strippers and things like that.
Yes. I mean, it was a rock star lifestyle.
Right.
That's going to be the solution, right?
But did you ride less and pay more attention to this club and get into?
You start losing the love for riding.
Right.
I definitely lost now the riding, which was a passion and one of my first loves, becomes just something. It became work, and not that we don't need to work, but it became something that was secondary. And then around all that, we weren't just getting paid to go ride. We were getting paid to go to the bars afterwards. We were getting paid,
bars are sitting there like, hey, 10 grand to go party here after the show.
Right.
Well, listen, man, like, unfortunately, and I don't mean to offend any bikers, like, bikers are bikers for a reason, you know what I mean? And it's just like, yeah, there's some great ones, but most of them are searching for the same thing I was searching for.
There you go.
Because they lost something that they probably don't even realize they lost. And so a lot of the stuff, I mean, a lot of the promoters we were dealing with were big drug dealers, drug lords, like, literally. Like, I mean, there was a point in the mid 2000s, one of our sponsorship was actually tied to the New York Mafia, right?
Wow.
So we were sponsored by the Mafia. And you know what the solution for the trouble we started getting into was? Find a lawyer to sponsor us. We had law firms sponsoring us to keep us out of the trouble that we were getting into, and then we had the money if they needed it or whatever. But we had law firms along the way. I laugh about it now that would literally, sponsor us and wouldn't charge us. And we would just do a commercial. We did these cheesy commercials, man. Like if you need a law, I would ride up, and the owner of the law firm would be there, and it'd be like, I'd come do a stoppie. If you need a lawyer for a criminal, and it wasn't accidents, it was for criminal stuff. So anyways, but that we just got fueled to do that. It seemed like, in the front of my mind, it was all justified. That's what the devil loves to do with people. Like, it's okay. You're not really doing anything that bad. You know what I mean? But going back to that newscast, like, it always haunted me. Yeah, this is illegal. I could potentially kill a family or run a bus off the road and, or kill myself or whatever. So it's like you just justify the actions. And obviously it helped because everybody was coming after us, giving us the things that we thought we needed. We became in my mind, I was invincible, right? But then as I slowly started gaining that success, my insanity inside was growing. So I became a lot more wild, right? So I was actually like, and I was searching for that peace and freedom that I used to get on a motorcycle and I thought was going to be the reward for success in the world. And so when that wasn't there, that's when, like, I'd never liked to drink, man. I'd never liked that feeling of not being in control because I was so performance driven. But now, I'm checking in with doctors. I got anxiety. I can't deal with it. They never stopped and said, well, it's because you have half the country's law enforcement chasing you and you got 15 felonies that you're facing. It wasn't that what, here's a pill. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so once again, I look at a lot of the prescriptions and stuff, and we mentioned it when you were trying to fix your cable, like, it's temporary, right? And I know what the core is now, but like then I was so desperate for that peace and that enjoyment of life that's where I thought, oh, these guys got to know. So over 27 years of like, and 15 of that was the Starboyz stuff, I saw probably over 24 psychiatrists, psychologists, and counselors to try to fix what I thought was broken up here. Like, when you look at me from the outside in the middle of the 2000s, when we were at the height of our success, like, how can I still not be okay? Right. And so I started believing that I was broken. I started believing that I was born broken. I didn't even think or equate the trauma in my life as being the problem. So I was looking for that temporary solution. And guess what? The drugs did it. Right. And so the pills just encouraged the lifestyle in the bars. And so, once again, I didn't like it and I didn't ever want that stuff in me, but I fell into it. But I was the dummy that did it, right? So now it's like we're starting to become more of a party type of group than a riding type of group, right? And so then we're also doing deals and working. Yeah, we work with some major companies and some legitimate companies, but like I said, a lot of the people that we're hiring, even going throughout the world, there was bigger outlaw bike gangs that were having us be part of their shows, and so. Even over in England, man, like we worked with a lot of people that weren't doing a lot of good things, but we were getting paid. You know what I mean?
Were you showing up at Daytona and Sturgis and all that too?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
of course, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and Laconia.
Yeah. We went to all the bike weeks, and we'd roll in there. Even if we weren't scheduled to do a show there, we would still go there, right, and hustle and just do the outrageous stuff and party.
Yeah,
like it definitely, not overnight, but it definitely went more to the party side of it because I was trying to numb this.
Right.
I was trying to numb this, but as you start to self-medicate, it doesn't make the insanity any better.
So when did it, when did this, because I mean, obviously you knew something was there in the background as you're seeing all these different counselors and stuff like that. And of course we've talked about on this show multiple times, like counselors are there to give you a pill, not really actually find the root cause in most cases anymore. It's so fast to and if that doesn't work, they'll just give you another one.
Give you more.
And then another one.
Yeah.
But at what point, you mentioned 15 felonies. I don't know if you were joking or at that point.
Oh,
you guys,
my
I would
record
imagine
is
you guys
crazy.
would have had some crazy.
My record
run-ins
is
with
crazy.
law at that point.
And it wasn't just local; it was national. You know, it was like, you know, I was getting in trouble all over the place.
So, what kind of stuff were you guys get? If you don't, do you want to share any of that?
Man,
Because
like-
I mean, right now, if anybody's listening, they're like, "Dude, this guy's living the life." But I mean,
No.
obviously, and we're going to transition into what you're doing now. But so let's talk about
Are
that.
there any active warrants right now?
No, right. Hey, when I first started going,
any cash rewards?
true story, man. I still have a little poster, not as bad, but when I first started going into prisons, legit, like when those doors closed, I would jump.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
I know you know
you're
that
doing
feeling.
it
I
now.
know you know that
Sure,
feeling.
he does.
Right? Like, so.
So let's talk about that gray area. So
Yeah.
I want to get into what you're doing now, but we're talking about, like I said, everybody's listening. They're like, this guy's living the life. He's living the dream, and they can probably sense that something's about to change. So let's talk about that area in between. Let's talk about.
Why don't we segue to a bathroom break and then do
You need
it?
a bathroom
I
break?
do.
Aw, you didn't
20
bring
I'm an
diapers?
old man. dude.
20 minutes while
Jeez,
we're.
who brought him?
All right, we'll take that break.
Yeah.
Look at Scott and the yellow hair there.
The blonde, long hair.
All right, look at the quality of this video.
Isn't it crazy?
He's shooting behind a windshield. You can see all the bugs and stuff on the windshield. God damn, that was a long fucking wheelie.
Yeah.
This is the one.
Hey, we were being good citizens.
Hold on, I was trying to. Oh, here it is.
There's the keys.
All right, hold on a second. All right, you're done with your piss break. We go. I want to catch this real quick so guys can see this. All those cars going the other
Yes.
way, like.
And we behind us would be all the traffic backed up.
It's so crazy to think that people are paying $20 for this quality of
Yeah.
tape. Like, but I mean, I have the old motocross tapes that were even
Yes.
worse than this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's sick. I'll have to put some clips on here when we get it. So is this your guys' YouTube channel? Oh, you guys, yeah. So you still have a YouTube channel.
Well, you know, when I split, like it wasn't a good split. I don't have access to that channel.
Oh,
Like,
actually, let's get into that middle section now. So we've talked about all the good. So I guess the bad would be worst crash. Did you ever?
No, not really. I guess the worst crash, and this is when I started to lose it, like, because one thing that I swore to myself was never ride a bike under the
Yeah.
influence, right? And you put these, like, I'll do it this far, but don't ever do it that far, right? So the worst crash I had, like, we used to do a lot of shows, man. So we would, like, do a Friday, Saturday, and then we'd have to travel. We had like a little tour bus thing and drivers and stuff, and so we would, you know, pass out, and then wake up to do another show the next morning somewhere else, and you know, so you were still under at least I was hungover and stuff, which is probably even worse. And it was crazy, man. Looking back, like the worst crash I ever had, like, and part of the downfall was I got married and I started having kids, right, and that was the wake up call that, like, we can get into. But the crash I had, it was we were coming back home to do a local show, and my wife at the time had brought my daughter and my son, and they were just little, and it was like in a mall parking lot, and ironically there was like a church like at the end of like our runway. This lady came out, and you know, I was a militant atheist, so I wasn't just one of those people that would back down from a good argument with a church person, right? And she had said something about the permits or something like that, and I jumped on my bike to warm up, and I forgot the night before I busted my front brake reservoir. Yeah, not good. And so it was crazy, like, because I would have, like, there was all these wake up calls. I think everybody has them,
Sure.
right? Wake up calls. You just ignore it or say, oh, well, like, I got lucky, or my skill was whatever. But I could have killed my own family. Like, I come just warming up and, half awake and stuff like that. I just got yelled at by this church lady. And I would, when we come in on those stoppies, you're hitting probably 0 to around 100 miles an hour real quick to bring it up on that front wheel. Well, I went to bring it up and there was no front brake. So there was like my family and probably 50 other spectators like right in front of my line of fire. And there was nothing between us and them. That was the other thing, man. There was so many kind of just pop-up shows that were just, we just did them, and there was no barriers. There was no like organization, it was just, and who cared? We were making the money, you know what I mean? But anyways, like, fortunately, I had a great background in motorcycling. I low slided it to save the people, but I flew like 30 feet, like, in the air, no helmet, no gear, t-shirt.
What year was this?
That would have been starting to go into like 2000, mid to later 2000s, like 5, 6, 7, 2005, 6, 7, around there somewhere. But I hit the ground and I blew out like an inch of bone right here in my wrist, but the bike stopped where I laid it down. It didn't hit anybody. I was rushed to the hospital. And crazy part about that is, that was I not that I wasn't doing the other pills at the time and drinking like a fish, but that was my intro to painkillers. Right. So it was just like, the devil had his plan
Right.
for my life in his hand. And it was just start to stack up more and more toxic stuff into my body. And obviously there was enough toxic stuff around it. So, anyways, that was the worst crash, like, really, like, I haven't hit the ground that much over my whole lifespan of riding.
That's
so
awesome.
I
Yeah.
hit the ground more dirt bike riding than I ever did stunt riding.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're in that gray area, right? Now's where the ride starts to come to kind of a close in a sense. So you mentioned this accident's kind of, one of those eye openers.
Yeah.
You mentioned you're starting to see some counseling for some stuff that's going on in your mind at this point. You mentioned that now you're spending more time doing the drinking and the drugs than the bike ride.
Yes.
Do you remember like a specific point? Yes.
There's a lot of specific points that, I started running into with the insanity that was building up inside of me. And, I wore it well. People didn't really recognize it. Like, it would definitely come out in my party lifestyle. Like, in the dark, it would come out because, like, when we partied, man, like, we were destroying stuff. Like, there's a lot of stories, like, I was doing Grand Theft Auto, just crazy stuff, like going to the bars and, someone roll up one time we were going to a bar and it was right after one of our big premiere parties. And, we would make tens of thousands of dollars at those. And, me and my partner at the time, like one of the riders that was part of it, we were like, both fighting with our girls just because whatever. So we just I would just disappear. You know what I mean? I would usually reappear behind bars somewhere. But anyways, people would be like, oh no, especially my family, my poor mom, like she got so many phone calls from all over the country. Like, getting a call from Dade County Jail, like, Mom, you got to put your house up again. Like, crazy, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what'd you do now, Scott? And so anyways, that was starting to happen a lot more. It was like, we got away with, at least I got away with a lot of the mischief after the shows, right? But then there's a time where you start getting sloppy, man.
Yeah.
Right. And then you start getting crazier. But people were actually, in that heyday, they would have like this hotline to figure out, like, where's Scott going to be tonight? They wanted, because I was like this wind up doll that would just, be entertainment for somebody,
Right.
whether it was like burning down a city or you know, jumping into a we were leaving this bar, and you know, we had broke off from our own party, right? And we were just going to get drunk and stuff. We all got our Starboy gear on, so we definitely, you know, the bar knew, the city knew, like, and this is just part of the craziness behind them never being able to truly catch us. But once again, I was getting caught in a different way, and you know, this taxi driver rolled up to go in to get somebody that called him, but they were blocking us, and I needed to get to the next bar. So I run in there. I'm like, "Yo, Mo," you know, just cussing him out, like, "Move that shit box out of the way," you know. And he's like, told me something. So I walk out. I'm like, okay. And he left his car running, man. So I jump in that thing, and you know, my my business partners and the close friends back then, they're like, "Oh no, man!" Like, you never knew what I was gonna do. So, anyways. I jump in that thing and did like the original Grand Theft Auto, like probably, you know, $250,000 to $500,000 worth of damage in
Holy
like probably
shit.
3 or 4 city blocks. Like, you know, like I went, I don't know, I went to a different place, a dark place, right? And I know where it was coming from now. Then I didn't know, but then once again, after something like that happened, like the draw for like. The draw to us was, oh my, you know, we became yes.
That's what made it bad, was that every time you would do something awful like that, it would lend into your credibility as an outlaw.
Yeah, we love it. This is, oh my God.
Do it again.
Like, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
I want to be there.
Yeah,
Right?
I was just gonna say, like, I mean, I'd have a beer with you back then. Like, shit, like, who knows what's gonna happen? Like, what?
Right. So that stuff was just common with me, and then obviously, like, the addiction to the drugs and the alcohol just were just ramping up the whole time. And then you got the prescription pills that, you know, are numbing the frontal lobe, that makes it, you know, even more justifiable in your own head. And then once again, I wasn't getting in trouble, and if I did, and then we had the money of the law firms to get us out of it. But you know, they can only keep up with so much at a time. It's just like, oh no, you know what I mean? So you know, but at the end of the day, and this is one of the things that we talk about, you know, in what I do now, it's just like, I know where you're, you know, people that kind of want to throw back hope and, you know, religion and what we have to offer now. I'm like, you know, I know how to counter that, because I was you, man. And I was probably 10 times worse. And the thing that I always throw back is, I know where you're going to be in the middle of the night. I know where you're going to be when you wake up from this, and not referring to actually where they're going to be, but where they're going to be in their
mindset.
head. Yeah.
We talk about it all the time. Cause I mean, I still drink. I don't drink as often. I don't drink as much. And I'm like, man, somebody that drinks every day, like, I don't know how you deal with it. Cause there's times if you drink too much the next morning, like, you talk about it being a downer, like, you were in the worst
It's a
mental
depressant.
space.
Right.
You are in the worst mental space. And it doesn't matter how good your life is, you can focus on the worst possible part of it and just spend that whole next day like at the bottom of the barrel. And it's like, man, to do this every day, like, I couldn't like wake up every day like this, like, because eventually you would get to the point where it's like, what's worth living for? Like,
well, and that's
that
it.
alcoholic aspect. And then obviously, of course, you mix in with other drugs for other impacts and things like that. But
yeah, they're all doing the same thing at the end of the day. And you know, I get a lot of different opportunities to talk at a lot of different places. And one time I was going into an insurance company and telling and the topic was, what is success? Right. And so, like, if you look at the worldly point of view of my success, and the whole point of me even talking about it is, just because you have all your needs met in the world in the bank accounts, if you can't enjoy that, that's not success.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, the definition of success in the American image is, you know, just having everything. But if your mind, body, and soul are not there, right, you're going to go into this place of insanity.
Well, that image of success has changed so much over even just the course of my lifetime. I can only imagine what it was like when my dad was a kid. But like, you know, now all of a sudden you have to have so much more to be successful. Like, before, you just like provide for your family,
Right.
have a roof over their head, dinner on the table, and you were successful.
Right.
Now it's like, well, if your car's not you know,
Yes.
2 or 3 years old or newer. If your 16-year-old's not driving a brand new Jeep Rubicon, like there's like so much more levels
The
to that now.
standards has gone up.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
and you see it with, you know, people like just in general on a day-to-day basis, and it's like, and I mean, it's hard not to fall into that trap once in a while. I'm not going to say that I'm like, I live my life in a tent and whatever, but it's like, we missed all that other stuff. Like, you know, you talk about all this stuff's going on with your family. Like, how many times did you guys just take a vacation and just go hang out? Like,
I was always gone, or I was always in trouble. And then once again, like everything that was forged in chaos just went to pay to try to remedy.
Stay out of it to keep going.
Yeah.
Scott, were your two partners just as wild and getting in trouble as you, or were they getting aggravated by your antics?
Yeah, you know, one of them kind of pulled out early 2000s, right after the second video.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he just, you know, he didn't have it in his blood. He was more like, got into motorcycles later in his life to pick up chicks. Like the main guy and I, it's in our blood. We were raised on him, and it'll always be there. I'll ride till the day I die. And I you know, often heard him say the same thing, and I believe it, you know. So he got in a little accident in one of the trips down to Daytona. It really didn't get hurt, but he'd never recovered mentally from that, and he just kind of faded himself out of it. So then it just became the one guy and myself. And
so at that point, did he kind of take off from the business? Did you guys kind of eliminate him from the business at that point?
Yeah, he was gone.
So then it was just you and the other guy's name. What is the other guy's name?
His name is Kevin.
Kevin.
Yeah.
So I guess was Kevin getting to the point where it's like, this is too much? Is this an issue, or was he living that lifestyle with you too?
Yeah, we were both in it, and
Yeah.
I kind of leave that for him to tell. You know, I don't
Gotcha,
like really
fair
kind of bringing in anybody else's side.
Yeah,
to it,
fair
you know
enough.
what I mean?
Fair enough.
Yeah,
I was looking at it from his point of view. Like,
Yeah.
was it causing a rift between you guys?
nobody.
at all?
I was so strongly driven. People suggested, but then again, like I was kind of the backbone of the business side of it. So it was like people wouldn't really hit me too hard because
Right.
I'm a guy that was disposed of people really easily. Like, so if you burnt me, like I was just, and that was just because of the protection I built up from the loss early on. Like if somebody's dead to me, they're dead to me.
I was looking at it from a musician's point of view.
Right. We're the rest of the band.
Like the band is showing up for the gig and you're coming in drunk,
Yeah,
or
no,
you're
we were
not
all-
showing
no,
up.
we
and
were
they're
all
like,
coming in drunk.
Right, right.
And we were
right.
all getting arrested. Yeah. So to answer that question, like
You guys were all living
we
the
were all
lifestyle.
living the same
Right.
lifestyle.
So Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses.
right. Although, people did, the close people back then did, see, like, but then they did see there was something deeper and darker about my insanity than
Yeah,
the
but at the
average
same point in
Joe.
time, they're afraid to say something. 'Cause, yeah.
And
makes
it was
sense.
mentioned a few times, you know what I mean? Like, but then it just became a norm. And once again, there was no consequences. So it was just like, a lot of times, like when I would just go off on my tangent at 2:30 in the morning or 3 in the morning, like for me, it was like, although most of those drugs are depressants, man, like it was just, they called me the gremlin, man. Like I would just go until sunrise, you know what I mean? But I wasn't just, and it wasn't, for me, it wasn't really, I didn't even need a crowd around me most of the time, which was scary. Like I was doing stupid stuff, like just
to do it.
Yeah. But I was now I know I was living this suicidal lifestyle. I was suicidal. I didn't care if I lived or die. Like, and I didn't, once you had that success in the world and you're starting to give up hope on ever being happy or content, right? Consistently happy. Like, and even and those times where, happy when things are going good and you have those things that should normally make you happy, I wasn't happy. I was just always miserable. And then you mix that with any drugs. I was never a good drinker. There's not one point I could look back and like say, oh yeah, it was a great time. No, because like I couldn't stop. And I have that. And they say your blessings can be your worst curse, and your curse can be your biggest blessings. Like I was so driven. I was all in for whatever I did. Obviously, motorcycle ride, I was all in. I was going to be the best. I was going to do, that Miami Vice. I was going to go get it. But then again, like, that drive, when it flips to partying and stuff. I was gonna be the best partier, right? You know, and then you have the entourage, like, where's
Well, I
Scott?
was gonna
Where's Scott?
say, then you have people like trying to pinpoint where you're at for a good
Yes.
time. You're like, well, hey, these guys drove for 2 hours to come see me. I'm gonna make it worth
Right.
their while.
Right. And the lifestyle was crazy, man. And not that I can get into all the details, but like it was a rock and roll lifestyle. Like this, it was insane. And the people we were hanging out was insane. The things that were going on around us were insane, man. Like it's like the movies, man. Like
This would be the point where we cue the montage, and it's just like these videos of like freaking women everywhere, like jumping off the top of buildings.
I mean,
into
we
pools,
destroyed
like,
every hotel we ever, and it was like, you know, it was the Motley Crue thing, you know, in our own way. I didn't even know about Motley Crue back
It reminds
then.
me of it reminds me of the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where they had the mamas and the papas. Do you remember the scene where Mama Cass was like running frivolously on, like, I don't know if it was like the Playboy Mansion or whatever, but they had just hit the big time and became big rock stars. And so here you have a woman who may not otherwise be very sexually appealing or somebody that anybody wants, but she's got millions of dollars and she's like running around doing whatever she wants.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that rock star lifestyle is just like it's like everybody's throwing themselves at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and before you know it, you're in it.
yeah.
And when you're in it, you don't know how to get out of it. Right.
So what led to you getting out? What was the last time you were officially associated with the Starboyz? I guess would be.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, kind of in that middle time when you asked if there was a defining moment.
So
it
like
was
06, 07?
06, 07. We were, you know, we had bikes and we were sponsored in England and we would do shows all around there and we were flying around and obviously, you know, it was at the height of the money making part of it. But, you know, like I said, internally, I was going into a really, really dark place, like outside of what people would recognize. Like it was like, you know, the thoughts in my head and just, you know, I was just talking about it the other day, you know, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe anymore. You know, it's like, it was just I was being crushed and I couldn't understand it. There was two definitive moments. Like I was seeking out some of the best doctors or psychiatrists. It was a psychiatrist at the time. And, you know, my family wanted me fixed, you know, that like, you need to, you know, and I truly knew what I was doing. You know, I knew I was not getting better. I was getting worse. I did know ultimately what was going to happen to me. And I couldn't stop. You know, I couldn't stop. And then, like I said, you know, when you start having children and you make promises to stop for them, and you look at their eyes, you know, that's truly when, you know, insanity peaks at its most. And so I was desperate for a solution. I was desperate for help. I was over all of the riding. I was over the whole lifestyle. I just wanted to enjoy life. I just wanted to be happy inside, right? I wanted to be able to like enjoy my family and the gifts that I was given. I didn't look at them as gifts though. I looked at them all as possessions. Even my kids, I can look back and it was just like no different than a really nice motorcycle. You know, you kind of put them in the ground. Oh, you know, you check off one of the boxes. You got to have kids, wife, you know, how with all that, you keep checking off the boxes. And it's just, you know, that mindset is just everything's a possession. And it's
That's
the
heavy,
ego,
man.
right?
That's
It's
heavy.
ego. And some of the most important things are the ones that are furthest in your cave. You know, I call it that caveman mentality. You know, you go out and you club something over the head, you get it, you bring it back, it's mine. Now you put it in the cave and you keep doing that. And the most important things in your life now are at the back of the cave and they're screaming, we need you. And you can't even see them or get to them anymore, you know. And then the drugs and alcohol and that lifestyle was just taking me further away from it. And so it's like, you know, people will kind of try to, not anymore, they'll try to argue with me about like the insanity and this and that. It's just like, or like, how can you possibly, you know, you got everything, you know? I'm like, yeah, you're right. But I don't in here. And so, you know, I was seeking some of the best help and to try to fix what I thought was broken. And this one time we finally like waited a year to get to see the best psychiatrist, right? And he's the one that can write the drugs. the good ones. And I remember everybody was so hopeful, like the ones in my family that truly loved me and wanted me fixed, you know, because I was becoming a mess. I was a sloppy mess. And I remember walking in there, man, it was walking into the devil. And I didn't know it. You know, it's all of his education, his plaques and all this stuff and the waiting list. And, you know, he ended up like diagnosing me with like 7 or 8 mental disorders, you know, and just like, you know, and I was still so desperate for an answer. I was like, yeah, you know, and obviously I can identify with those things that he was telling me, but somewhere deep inside of me, I'm like,
That's not it.
yeah, that's not. I knew it, but I
you-
was so desperate.
Do you think that you had the answer, but you just didn't want to admit it to yourself at that point?
No,
No?
I didn't yet. I didn't.
Okay.
Right, because I was a God hater at first, and then I was a militant atheist. I know. I don't know if you got that part. So
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like the guy, like, you know, if there was somebody outside the bar with like a Jesus brochure or, you know, come to this and that, I wouldn't just stop and walk by, or I wouldn't just walk by him. I would actually stop and like, you
Argue
know,
with them,
oh
like,
yeah,
yeah.
And so, you know, grab all their stuff and throw it in the trash, and they'd just be like praying for me, like, you fool, you know, this and that. And so, you know, like it's just, and God didn't miss, you know, because this is what I use and what we do today. But anyways, back to that doctor, I just remember sitting there and he wrote me out a couple scripts. Well, I was already on scripts from other doctors, but, you know, just wrote me some more. And he's like, yeah, this will do it. And, you know, it was crazy because I can't remember exactly what they were, but I did research it. I was doing research. I'm a research guy, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like I do love knowledge, and I was searching for that knowledge. Even like when I said I naturally had business skills, like I never went to school for it. And, you know, unfortunately, like drug dealers have great business skills too, you know what I mean? So anyways, I would always research, and I was like, I would look up the medication I was on, and it's just kind of like, you know, showing justifying what it does or telling you what it does, but then at the fine lines at the bottom, it's like it's crazy because I do remember this, like, well, we don't know exactly what it does to your brain. We just know out of the test monkeys that we use that it helps. But sometimes, you know, you take an antidepressant, and the first main drawback is it may increase your
Right.
suicide thoughts, right? So that should have been the warning there. But anyways, he diagnosed me with, I think, 7 mental disorders. And, you know, those 7 disorders I never had as a child, right? And so right there, I'm like, but I was still so desperate. And I remember him grabbing me to set up another appointment, you know, and I went into my car, and my wife at the time was calling me, and I pick up the phone, and I guess I never wanted to admit that something in my mind was broken, but he's telling me it is. And so she said, how'd it go? She was probably so hopeful, you know, to get me fixed, you know, and I said, everybody's right. I'm broken, you know, and the craziest thing about that moment was I was living a suicidal life, but then I wanted to commit suicide because I thought it was too broken to be fixed. But I was going to give these pills a chance, right? And then we were joking around about Jack Nicholson and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Like, you know, didn't really like that movie. I watched it when I was really young, and it was creepy and this and that, but I remember that part. Like, I just remember Jack Nicholson relating to him and his
Right.
charisma, right? That was me, you know, jumping. That would be me in the mental ward, right? Let's break out and go get a boat and this and that, and just, you know, being, you know, lifting everybody up and things like that. But, you know, when they got lobotomized, right? Like, that's what those drugs did to me. And it was just a feeling I'll never forget, you know. And then once again, like his solution, the world's solution, this doctor's solution were these drugs, and I couldn't even get off the couch.
You know, I want to just emphasize something for this interview, and that is the message that you can put out there right now for so many young people or so many other people that are like pursuing a life of things, because you had everything. Anybody could ever want. And yet when you ascended to the top of that of that mountain and looked around, you found nothing.
Nothing.
You found emptiness. And that is such a message that people need to hear so desperately out there, because we're all like pursuing things.
Actually, when I was at the top, it wasn't just nothing. It was below, right? It was actually worse.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think of like Robin Williams, Scott.
Yeah.
Here's one of the greatest comedians that ever walked the face of the earth. Everybody just loved him. He was so fun to be around. All of his shows, Mork and Mindy, all that stuff was just great. And yet, here's a guy who has millions and millions of dollars, could take he could take a yacht, stick it in a blue lagoon, fill it full of babes and kilos, and just do whatever he wants.
Right.
And you'd think that would be the answer to happiness, and he just was empty.
Well, as you guys are sharing this story, you guys listen to country music at all? Luke Combs?
A little bit.
Luke Combs got this song. It's called The Part. And it talks about like, they talk about the best parts are the playing your songs in front of a bunch of people and the girls, but they don't tell you about the nights that you're there alone in the dark, or that the one girl that you should care about is at home. And, it kind of makes me like think about this aspect of this life you're living is like, the part that everybody talks about is when they hear the Starboyz is the first half of this, right? But then there's the back side of it, whereas you don't see what's going on behind the scenes. Or maybe you do, but you think it's cool because you're on the outside looking in.
Right.
But you don't realize what you're tortured with as far as your mind goes at that point. So you go to this doctor, you wait a year to see him, and you keep saying your family's hoping that you're fixed. I think your family's just hoping that you're going to be there. Like,
yeah.
I don't think they think that you're broken. I think that they don't know how to help. My dad was an alcoholic, and my stepdad, both severe alcoholics. I think when you just don't understand, like, I don't understand how I can have a drink and he can't without going into like the abyss, right? So it's like, it's that helpless feeling. It's kind of like you said, like when people say, oh, like I lost my dad too. Like, no, but it wasn't my dad.
Right.
It's like not the same for everybody. Like everybody grieves a different way. And when you're the outsider looking in, I've always thought like, I don't want to go up to somebody and say, hey, I'm sorry for your loss. Like, I just want to be like, hey, I'm here if you need me. Like,
it's cliche anyway.
Because
right?
it is cliche. I don't like that it's cliche, but at the same point in
I'm
time,
sending
it's like
positive vibes.
Yes.
Yeah, but for your family, like they're sitting there like they just want their dad or they just want their husband, and they don't know how to help. So that you talk about, they're all hoping that something good's going to come of this, and obviously it doesn't happen in one visit. But what does happen in one visit is just like every other psychiatrist and counselor out there, especially when it comes to mental health, is they just want to throw you on a bunch of drugs and they want to put you on a bunch more. And then you're on so many at the point in time, you don't know what's doing what. And you hear all these different podcasts with doctors and stuff. It's like people come into my office and they're on 35 different prescriptions. How am I supposed to know what's wrong with you? Like you're on 35 prescriptions that all have 500 different side effects
and targeting your brain, the most precious, complex
right. It's
thing in the world.
I talk about all the time. Like Adderall was awesome. I loved being on it, but like I was like, there's no way that this doesn't going to have some long-term effects. So after being on it for like 2 years and I got off of it, like, man, I was cloudy for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And all I could think about was like, what was that going to do to me long-term?
Right.
Like, was I
going to It was going to lobotomize you. You'd have been
like,
Jack Nicholson.
Where would I have been? Yeah. Where was I going to be at 50, 60 years old if I decide to stop taking it? Right. So you go see this doctor. He prescribes you a bunch of stuff, tells you got a bunch of different mental issues.
Yes.
7 different problems.
I truly gave up hope shortly after that. There was that moment in that car where it's like, wow, you know what I mean? Maybe he's right. Maybe, I was just born broken. Maybe I was, I always joke around in the prison yards, you got that tattooed, born to lose. Maybe it was just, I was cursed, and so I didn't still equivalate it to, the faith thing. And so anyways.
Well, when you get on the phone with your wife, I'm just curious, what's her, like, cause you're questioning it, but what's her first thought when you're like, does she, I mean, I don't know her, so I don't know what is she feeding back to you when you say like, they say I'm broken and I need to get 7, 8 different personality disorders and they gave me more meds. Like, what is she thinking at that point in time?
I don't even know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because this wasn't the first doctor. This was one of the best, but we've already tried this. And so even subconsciously I knew like whatever he was going to give me wasn't most likely going to work. Right. Because I've already tried so many other things.
She's probably thinking the same thing. Like, great, more drugs.
But they just wanted to dad and they wanted me present and wanted the police to stop knocking down the door. Right. And me stop calling from different prisons or jails across the
So
country.
this puts you in basically coma.
Yeah. So it puts me in a coma, and I remember going back, and he actually, the solution. I couldn't sleep. I already had a hard time sleeping, and so it was like, it was just maybe 1 or 2 more sessions. He just increased the amount of whatever. You just need, and it was like that was crazy. If that isn't the deal from the devil, I don't know what is. And so,
you can't get off the couch, you can't function, you can't sleep, so you need more drugs.
Well, and even just like what you said, they all have consequences. They all have side effects, and they're just going to get, the consequences are going to be worse, and it's just going to get more in depth the longer you take it. And so, anyways, but once again, I wanted fixed. I wanted the solution.
Just like most people,
I was desperate. Right?
Like most people that are on a antidepressant or all these different pills, it's not like they want to take drugs.
No.
It's
They
like,
just want help.
They just want help, and this is what they're. This
they
is
want
what's
peace.
out there. In
They
our
want
society.
peace. They want freedom. They want that that comfort, right? And so
I went to a psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever it is, maybe 2 years ago, because I was having some sincere anger problems, and they flicked.
And you just realized it was everybody else's fault.
They gave me something.
Fucking dumb people.
that was me. It was all your fault.
So this guy over the phone, never met me a day in his life, only talked to me a half hour, prescribes me a pill. It was Prozac. I took it. It made me angrier. And then he's like, well, let's try this.
Yes.
And so I tried that, and it didn't work. I'm like, and then he's like, let's try this. And I'm like, you know what? We're not
You're
going to
done.
keep playing this game.
Yeah.
Right,
You
like guess and find
so
out.
I'll just go be angry, I guess.
Yes.
You know?
That's crazy.
Yes.
And it's not just in that aspect too. Like even for my VA benefits, like you have to go to get diagnosed with PTSD, and they wanted me to do this extra interview, and because the first person I spent an hour and a half on the phone with didn't report any findings to the VA or whatever. They didn't even report at all. So I had to go do it again. And this guy, I go up to this fancy office in downtown Cleveland. And I'm in his office, and he asked me a series of 8 to 10 questions. We're in there for 15 minutes. Now, last time it was an hour and a half. At least she asked a lot of in-depth questions and was trying to get to the point. He's like, all right, that's all we needed. I'm like, what the fuck did you diagnose, bro? You did 8 questions?
Right.
Is that what my life comes down to? That's what 5 years of combat service and my head space where I'm at. I'm sitting there, I'm opening up about divorce and about my relationship shit. And you literally stop asking questions after about 15 minutes and you're like, all right, we're good here. And it's
crazy.
Dude, and these are the people that get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to help our society. And we wonder why we're all so mentally fucked.
And it's getting worse.
It's getting way worse.
Yes.
Now it's starting at a younger age.
Yes.
It's at least you're at the point where you're 30 years old with now it's my daughter, 13 years old, they wanted to put her on antidepressants. Said she's got high anxiety. I'm like,
yes.
Fuck, she's a teenager going through puberty in high school. Of course she's got anxiety.
Right.
Everybody does.
Right.
Stop giving her a pill to deal with it, and she'll overcome
the easy
it.
solution instead of digging down.
And
to
then these
the
kids
root.
are fucking marshmallows at 20
Well, and all
years
you
old.
need is
Yes.
one case, where it works, and they're like, "See,
Yeah.
that's the
Well, and
But
all
what's their definition of working, right?
That's the
I
problem.
can go sit in class all day now. Okay, but at the same point in time, now because I have anxiety, my teachers will let me go to the egg room or whatever for a fucking hour
Yes.
and
The
do
egg
nothing. And
room?
it's
What's the egg
so
room?
now you're
the
teaching
room you get to scream in.
It's like mental health rooms that they have, but you're allowed to go in
Safe
there and
space.
sit on
Well,
your fucking phone for 2 hours. And it's so now you've taught them that, okay, if you don't feel right, you go to this person and you get drugs. And then when you're done with the drugs, you go to school and you tell them now you have a disorder. So now you get to go sit in a room by yourself and play on your phone for 3 fucking hours instead of learning something. I'm like,
Right.
at what point in life did they learn
the world
that?
gives you simple solutions to go around the problem.
Yes.
You need to face it, right? And the problem with giving someone a pill to go around the problem is that they start living this delusional life, just like I did. You know what I mean? Here it is. You know what? Why don't you stop breaking the law, Scott? That might help with your
shit.
anxiety
Yeah, right.
and your depression, right? Well, stop drinking. Right? That might help. No, continue all that and we'll
Take
go
this.
around
Take
that
the pill.
problem.
Right.
Right? And the other thing I want to mention is we're going to believe that their statistics are true,
Right.
that it's working.
Yeah.
No.
No, of
We
course.
know it isn't. Anybody I've ever talked to that's been on that stuff is saying the same thing.
Right.
Right? Which is a lot of people. And the problem is, it does start to rewire your brain, just like what you said, coming off of
100%.
Adderall. Like when I came off of all the stuff I was on, it took my mind over a year to just kind of like, I could almost feel it start to come back alive.
I can imagine.
Right. So the defining moment for me was like, that was like my last draw, right? My last hope. And once again, that's when I was like lobotomized, you know? And so unfortunately it was going into my mid 30s. And obviously at this point, my sloppiness is starting to affect the business, starting to affect the Starboyz. You know, honestly, a lot of the chaos we were starting to get, like we would go out before the event. And there was a couple times when we were actually at the event, like droves of police would come in to arrest us at the event. How embarrassing is that, right? And so
Once again, people probably thought it was awesome.
Yeah, and not embarrassing.
Well,
Cool,
and here,
cool.
no, here it is. The sponsorship from the mafia that we got was the night before I demolished a hotel. Right. And so we were going to get this show going, and I was keeping an eye. I always keep an eye on your surroundings. You know what I mean? Like, don't ever sit in the middle of the room with your back towards the door.
Right.
That was my life. Right. And so anyways, you know, the police did come, the owner paid them off. And then my business sense was he thought we were so cool. I ended up going home. That was the first bike sponsorship. So he paid $7,000 for the damages out of his pocket so he wouldn't arrest us, so the police wouldn't arrest us, so we could do the show. And then afterwards, he calls us into his office, just so you guys know, like, you didn't get away with destroying the hotel. And then somehow within that hour conversation, I'm walking through his showroom and convince him to give us bikes and sponsor us. So not only do we get away with, you know, destroying a hotel room, we get rewarded for it.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a tie for us working with them for a while. Right. So anyways, but it all started to kind of like crumble down. And that's, you know, that's what the devil does in somebody's life. You know, he comes in subtly and behind and through the back doors, and, you know, he gets you wondering, and you're trying to find this solution. And ultimately things really, you know, the ground that you thought you were standing on is definitely taken from underneath you. So
timeline for me is after you go to the counselor, that you waited for a year.
yeah.
Then you start to be comatose by the drugs and stuff.
Yeah.
Then the downfall starts to happen.
Yeah.
So at the same time, you're still doing Starboyz stuff.
Yeah, we're still traveling.
Okay.
We were still at the height of it. Like I said, when I was sitting in that car with those prescriptions and that diagnosis from this guy, like it was when I truly started thinking. And suicide for me was more or less, you know, the world wants to say it's a selfish act, which I understand. But for somebody that's in a suicide mode like I was starting to become such a monster and such a threat to my own family that when I started thinking about ending my life or taking Scott out of the equation, it was actually an act of saving the people around me. If I continue to be the monster and I can't stop ever being the monster, then I need to take Scott out of the equation to protect those around me.
Wow, you made suicide valiant.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah,
like
that's
that's
crazy.
the approach, but at the same point in time, now your kids are growing up without a father and stuff like that. But I could see at the same point in
Yeah,
time,
but-
like that
but
being your point of view, because you're looking as like, what kind of father am I actually being?
I was a
Like,
monster.
Like I'm actually worse for their life.
Yes.
In that sense.
Yes.
All right, so
So within that time span, I don't exactly know the exact numbers, but it was like in my mid 30s, and you know, we were over in Europe for a couple weeks doing one of those big shows, and I had stopped taking the 40 pills a day that one because I couldn't
right.
get on a plane or get off the couch, and so you know, I was just back in like this the willpower, muster enough up one more time, you know, but in the back of my head, like I'm already thinking about like, man, like I'm not going to change. I'm born broken. I'm born to lose. You know, I'm just born to be a horrible person, a horrible father, a horrible husband. And I'm born into this darkness, and I'm never going to be able to get out of it. So, but I still was trying to function and still trying to live life. But the defining moment was to come back. It was still at the heyday. I was starting to get sloppy, though. You know what I mean? And come back from that tour. And I remember sitting on the back deck, and it's my ex-wife at the time, but and my two beautiful kids were running around and excited that I was home, and I told you about I wasn't able to breathe, right? And I felt like, I was being crushed by this force, and I didn't know what it was. I know what it is now, but I didn't know what it was then. There was no solutions. Obviously, the 20-some people I talked to, and they didn't have it. And I was on that back deck, man, and I was truly at the peak of the lobotomy. The lobotomy, I was like, and the way I explain it is like, I have memories of the zoo when I was little and the gorillas, and they would always be so depressed, and it seemed like, that glass was so thick, right? And you want to talk about anger issues, they always get angry and beat and stuff like that. But I felt like that gorilla, right? And the glass between me and life wasn't just a couple inches thick. It was like 3 to 4, 5 feet thick between me and probably the most precious gifts that I would ever have. I couldn't feel anymore. I couldn't feel anything anymore, And so that was the first time that I was just like, man, truly didn't feel like living anymore. I already had those thoughts pre, and so that was 35, and the next 5 years were like, if I thought I was a monster, I was on a suicide mission, man. Those
What
5
did a
years
typical
were-
day look like for you then? I'm real curious. So like a typical day in that state was medicate, get up, medicate, and keep the addiction going.
Try to function, try to do the things that you were able to used to do.
What was I say? Are you
watching things starting to crumble, knowing that like, at any given time I had some kind of charges now, that or a court case that was
Were
rolling.
you losing weight, looking awful,
Not
sick?
not so much at 35, but like my addictions to street drugs from 35 to 40 went.
I was gonna say, so at 35, like you mentioned, you're still riding, you're still doing competitions, you're still with the Starboyz.
Yeah.
And then so it did transition then outside of the
then it was like, like for a certain amount of time I was, and addiction's addiction, you know what I mean? Like, I would always justify my addiction. Oh, at least I wasn't a daily drinker, you know what I mean? And obviously the prescription meds was a daily thing, but then, the recreational side of it wasn't a daily thing. But then from 35 to 40, it was a daily thing. And then that's when I truly, if I was already in a dark hole, I was going down.
So
even
40
further.
years old, are you still Starboyz at 40?
No. Well, that was so that we're speeding up to like 2000, and it was like perfect storm there because if you remember, there was a market crash, 2008, 2009,
Right.
like the housing, all that stuff crashed, and the motorcycle industry crashed.
Right.
So like everything disappeared overnight. 50% of the motorcycle industry in 2008 and 2009 went out of business, right?
Yeah.
Sponsors gone, right? Like obviously, like we're
Shows
already
are
getting
dead.
trouble.
Shows are
Shows are
smaller,
gone. Like it
gone.
was almost like the precursor to COVID, right? Back then. I don't know if a lot of people remember it. I do.
Yeah, it was
but
tough.
yeah. And a lot of people are losing their jobs or getting forced into early retirement. And it was just a crunch time. And then,
God, it feels like it was so long ago.
It
but it
does.
doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but
Right.
like at the same point.
That was the
in time-
beginning of Obama.
Yeah.
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 So in that time, like, the money that was coming in was, it wasn't used wisely anymore. It was,
Right.
now it was covering, the lawyers now weren't sponsoring us, and things started backing away, and,
Now everything's an expense.
it's spiraling down,
Yeah.
And so, and obviously everything else, in my life was ramping up when it came to the addiction issues, and
Right.
the insanity wasn't getting any better.
Are you
and the
still married at
hopelessness.
40?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so that was, the other defining moment. Like things had gotten so bad that, divorce was on its way. Like, and then October 4th, 2011 was like the day. Like that was the day. I'd been, so I had anger issues, as everybody does. Some
Sure.
people can, handle it. And fortunately to say, I don't have them anymore. But, and obviously the addictions don't help with any anger
Right.
issues.
Yeah.
And, out of anger, like, the next phase up from that is violence, right? So I became very violent. And, I mean, that's a long story, and I don't know if we'll go there, but you can imagine, like, there was a restraining order against me, right? Like,
Abusive.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was a monster.
So those are
Yeah.
the kind of legal troubles, unfortunately, that are worse than the running away on a bike and,
Yeah.
and doing stuff like
Yeah.
that, right? Because
Yeah.
now it's really starting to turn.
Well, and that's that.
Now it's starting to portray you as a certain person, too.
Yeah. Well, and, taking myself out of the equation became even that much more relevant,
Sure.
right? If I can't control this, nothing can stop it. Nobody can help me. No drugs are doing the trick. And my addiction still didn't stop.
Yeah, I was
there.
going to say,
it
at this
just
point, you're still
increased.
addicted.
Yeah.
You're still, right.
All the money started going to my addiction issues because it was now street drugs, and which aren't cheap. And it was daily. And
Was your partner going through the same things at this
I don't
time,
know.
or was he telling
The interesting
get
part,
distant?
we were always kind of like that. Like I was, we were obviously really good friends back then, but he lived his life, and like when we would be in the middle of shows and stuff like that, we would just kind of, he would do his things, and I would obviously I was trying to raise my family and stuff like that, so, or be with them, but he just kind of, everything became distant.
Right.
Mhm.
It wasn't the same.
Well, you guys probably aren't spending as much time together at this point either, because the bike shows are starting to
Right.
deplete. Like you
Right.
guys are, it's like sunsetting on the Starboyz. At
Yes,
this point,
it
right?
was.
Yeah.
It was. There was actually an article like that comes up. That was, I think it was shot on that trip to England that I was telling you about when I came back home from. That I was that gorilla, but we were on top of a building in downtown London, and the whole thing was like, where did the Starboyz go? Right? Like I can't remember the topic of the article, and it's crazy because I saw the picture. It was a gangster picture at the time, but look up, see if it comes up under that. But I look at my eyes in that picture.
Images.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
right there. That cop slide, black and white.
Right here?
Yep.
Like he remembers exactly. Oh, yeah.
Like
Look how young you look back then, brother.
yeah. That picture takes my breath away now because that
Like
was
just
the
thinking,
end.
this is it, right?
That
Is that
it.
Kevin right there?
Yeah. It was so, we should, where did they end up? That's what they, overnight they disappeared. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that sums it up. And it wasn't
This
just,
is back in '99 when
that was,
this must
that
have been
time
the first time you
frame.
went.
Yeah, no, that time frame.
They wrote the article. Oh, this is 2000. Updated.
No, he's
2024.
updated it. So that time frame is, I don't think, right on there.
Oh, now they're giving you an ad for
Right.
for a
What is
bike.
it? Or I just saw the ad for the pills at the bottom.
I was gonna say, yeah. Look at pills here. Pills.
What's going on?
Like pills and motorcycles. Thanks, Google.
Jeez.
Look at
Wow, that's crazy.
that.
So yeah, man. Anyways, on October 4th, 2011, I come out of the courtroom and
Go ahead, brother. I'm closing. this
yeah,
up.
I come out of the courtroom and terminating the marriage, and I had a restraining order, which was actually a good thing. And I was living on my mom's couch, right? Like I always joke around, like we start on mom's couch, or in mom's house, and then if you do really well in life, you end up back on mom's couch. No, I'm just teasing, but I'm just going to start a ministry called Mama's Couch.
Well, there you go.
Right. So, anyways, coming out of there, that was the day. That was the day that I knew it was all done. Like I knew, deep down that I needed to get rid of myself. It's crazy to say that now, but obviously, switch things around here, and it was all leading up to what God was really doing behind the scenes the whole time, and goes all the way back to my childhood, right? And it also kind of enforces the facts of everything that I tried to fix myself with, of the world had to offer, that didn't work. So he was, had this plan for October 4th, 2011 and in his history books for me, and I had no idea, you know. So they say the worst day of your life can be the best day of your life, and that's what it was. Like I walked out of that courtroom that morning, and it was over. You know, jokes on me. Like, you know, enough was enough. Like it was probably one of the most courageous things a woman could do is to, you know, protect her children.
Yeah.
And I actually understood that. But it was definitely the most heartbreaking thing to experience because I didn't want to be that person. I didn't set out in life to be that person. You know what I mean? I just became it. And it was all my fault, right? Prior to that, I blamed everybody else for my problems. I even blamed my kids. It's because of you, you make me drink. You know what I mean? Or it's because of you. It's because of this, you know? No, it's because of me, right? And so anyways, you know, I come out of that courtroom and I'm in my car and I'm like, I'm done. I had a bottle of Xanax at my mom's house and I was going to go home and eat them all up. And then, you know, God works through people in mysterious ways. You know, as soon as that thought was solidified and I had my plan of action and my phone starts ringing. It's Mom. Right? How'd it go with Scotty? You know, like, you know, text back. I said, it's over, Mom. It's over. I wasn't going to tell her I was going to commit suicide that night or that day, but I'm like, you know, it gave me this thought to kind of like, okay, I'll just spend the rest of the day with her. And when she goes to bed, I'll do it.
Man, just thinking about that moment in your head, like looking back, like all the stuff you would have missed out on if you would have completed that.
Well, and that's the mission now.
Yeah.
How many people are thinking that right now?
Yeah.
Right? And this is where God doesn't miss in his genius plan for all of our lives, right? And I never saw it coming, right? Never. You know, I was a
Yeah,
God.
you were the atheist.
I
man.
was. I was the militant
Yeah.
atheist, right?
Yeah.
You know. And so anyways, you know, I wander back home and at those moments in time, like in life, like every second like hurts and every second feels like a day. Like it's so slow, right? It's just like, and it's like I go back there and you know, obviously my mom could detect that there was something desperately wrong with me, different than the other times, like, you know, because at that point, like, you know, I'd become such a drug addict the previous 5 years, like I was going for broke and going big. Like there was times where my heart stopped beating and I was taking trips to the hospital. And, you know, like I said, the police were always at my house, banging on my door, knocking the door down. Like the trouble started sticking. You know, I had like at that time, I think 3 felony charges in 3 different states. And obviously a restraining order. I couldn't come within 500 feet of everything that I created, you know, and just, how could I not want to take my life, right? That's kind of how I look at it now. But anyways, I go back home and you know, she's just trying to get me. At the time, I was still going to some meetings out there that, you know, encourage sobriety and stuff like that. And I really didn't have any friends left at that time. They all scurried away. You know, when Scott got real bad, the ones that wanted me to get help, you know, they were nowhere to be seen, which is not ironic. But anyways, you know, she had called a friend. She's like, just go to a meeting. I'm like, I'm not going to an effing meeting. I'm done. And she had called a friend of the family, and he mysteriously, she was like, I'm going to call. I'm like, don't call. I'm not doing anything. I'm done, Mom. I'm just done. Leave me alone, you know? And so at that point, I was the description you had mentioned earlier. I was probably 80 pounds wet and, you know, I was a proper cracked out looking dude, and there was nothing left of me. And, you know, at that point it was like every drug. I wasn't, you start off like, you know, fancy drug addict, I don't
High-end cocaine and, like,
and then
all the good stuff.
and then it's bath salts off the bathroom floor, right? Like whatever it is, baking
We
powder.
laugh, but I mean that's like
It's the truth.
It's
Smoke a piece of a cracker.
Yeah.
we laugh, but like we're
horrible.
talking about rock star status, but like that's how all the rock stars like. It starts with like just cocaine before a show, and it's like the best of the best, pure. And then at the end, it's like they're doing it off of the fucking
Smoking a piece of
bathroom
cheese.
floor because they spilled the last little bit. They're like. But I
Man,
mean,
true story. Like, there's one time, like, I wanted to quit. So I quit. Like, I was the best quitter, right? But unfortunately, like, the one
You're
thing
also the best starter.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the one thing you do need to quit in life, like, I couldn't. Like, one time it was like, up for God knows how long. It was in the middle of the darkest time of my addiction. That's another story in itself, but another time. But I'm like, and then when you initially get high, you're like. You get this boldness and this courage, and part of that was to throw away the rest of my drugs in the toilet, right?
Of course.
But that was so delusional. Like, then when I started being the man in the box when you're coming down, I actually took the toilet off.
oh
thinking
they would still be in there.
And the funny part now is that toilet, because I was so lobotomized. That toilet was and I put it in the bathtub next to it, and that toilet was there in that bathtub for probably a year, just because I was, you're just anyway. There's so many. The insanity and the depth of the insanity that the devil can take you is unlimited, man. It really is, and unfortunately, but part of God's plan was to make sure I went big, and I know that, and that's why we can help so many people now, because there's not too many people that can tell the addiction stories as deep and dark as mine were.
Well, yeah, because I mean, we're just talking about a few highlights here over a couple hours, but like I'm sure, like every time you speak, like you're like, oh, this one time.
Yes.
It's like that American Pie movie. This one
It
time
is.
in band camp.
It is.
This one time on a fucking drunken bender in a different city in a different country.
There was so many times that I forget about them sometimes.
Of course.
Right? Like, it's like, or somebody will remember. And they'll be like, remember when you did this? I'm like, did I?
Well, because
Right?
we talk about bike shows or stuff like that where it might be a Thursday, Friday, Saturday event thing.
Yeah.
But like a regular week probably was still like, hey, come up on a Wednesday night to this place or go to this place
It was
on a
every
Thursday.
night. Yeah.
And on a bike, you could be there at 0 to, in no time. So,
Right.
all right. So we
So
talked
October
about
4th, 2011, man, it's just like, I'm done. I'm out. Like, I'm going to do the world a favor by getting rid of this monster, and to protect not just my family, but everybody that I come in contact with. there was just numerous stories of the violence started getting so bad, like, by the hand of God, like I didn't take any of my kids' lives or my ex-wife's life, or, but there was times that it got close. And
but your mom had a plan, though.
Yeah, man.
Mom
My
had a plan.
mom was dialed in with God from the day my dad died. She I know that now, and it's kind of, I don't want to say eerie, but it's crazy. And so there's a lot of little things that little details that I have to leave out here just because of time's sake. But anyways, she wanted me to go to this damn meeting, and I'm just like, no. And then she called this guy or texted behind my back, come get Scotty. He's in a bad way. And, motherly instinct, she had known, like I said before, there was times where I was like, I was suicidal. Right. So, and it was just, she just had this calm about her. Maybe it was not internal, but she had this exterior calm. Like it's almost like God had given her this pre-warning that he was going to come get me, And so, in even that day, like I said, fine, I'll go, and it was probably like noon, and the noon one, like, was canceled, and then they have a book that tells you all of them in the area, and so we went to there was one at 2, and the one at 2 is at this sober biker bar. I'm like, I'm not going into that one. The last thing I want to be around is sober bikers, and then so we left that one and went to another one. There was like 5 people there. I'm like, I'm not going there. They're all going to want to talk to me and this and that. And God was getting me to this one that was at 8:00. That was like huge. It was a huge place, man, and there was like 100 people there, like every. What night was that? Was it I don't know, Monday or Tuesday nights they had this huge meeting there. But anyways, I go into that place and I just go in there, I put my head down. I don't want to talk to anybody, but wants to talk and this and that. And my mom's friend is sitting next to me. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm just gonna buy the time until I get back home and do what I do, you know. And so I put my head down, and this guy starts talking, right? And it's strange, and it's something that always bothered me about some of these meetings. You know, certain ones they don't allow like you to talk about your drug use. Certain ones, like they just keep it to certain usage, and you know those ones were kind of useless to me because although I was I had problems with alcohol at the time, like it was way more than that. So a lot of the stories you hear, like, oh, it's great that this guy, but was nothing like me. You know what I
Right.
mean? There was hope for him, but there's not for me. But anyways, fast forward, this guy starts talking, right? And it was a younger voice, and he didn't care. And he started mentioning things that reminded me of my dad. My dad was a Catholic school teacher, and he had to wear a tie. My dad always hated ties, and he would always joke around about it. And this kid made this tie joke, right? And it was just like, it was weird. It just hit me, like smacked me in the back of the head. And in the reason why you're supposed to dress nice in these meetings when you're a feature or present or speaker or whatever. And the guy that was originally supposed to do that one just got food poisoning. So he was close, and they called him last minute, and he was somewhere, and he just rushed there, and he said, I apologize, but I hate ties anyways. And I looked up, and I'm like, I saw myself. Like he looked just like me, man. Full tattoo, full sleeves and this and that. And he starts talking, goes straight to the drugs. I'm like waiting for him to get kicked out for talking about the drugs, and then his addiction problems. And then there's 100 people in this room. And this is just part of the miracle that a lot of people, used to come out, no, it didn't happen. Like he pointed right at me. And he said, if you're not ready to give your life to God, then there's always a bar across the street or close to those meeting places, which is pretty crazy,
Right.
He says, then get up and go across the street, buy a bottle, and keep drinking until you are. And the part about it is not necessarily that, yeah, I can do that, right? But I swear to you, and I wouldn't be here today if this wasn't the truth, it was my dad's voice. It was my dad speaking to me.
Like you heard your dad.
It was like, it gives me the chills. And I was like, when he pointed at me, the room lit up. And it was the
Right.
kid that was talking.
But you heard
it
your
was my
dad's
dad's
voice.
voice. And I was like, it probably said a swear word. I'm like, that was my dad. And then went back to regular lighting, and he stopped pointing at me and started talking again. And I'm like, so now my thought was strictly prior to this was suicide. Take your mission. Take those pills. Do it. Stick with the plan, Scott. We got a plan here, And that was the devil on the Popeye shoulder, right? And now it's like the angel. And that was your dad, Scott. That was your dad. I'm like, that was my dad. What in the hell? And I had been I'd been 2.5 weeks completely sober from everything at that time.
Oh, wow.
Right? Yeah. So that's a little side story. So you were no, right? It doesn't matter if people believe me or not. Like
Right, yeah.
that
I mean,
that are
your story is
naysayers.
your story.
That's
but
right.
At the same
Right.
point in time, like you were sober, like you still were having these thoughts. Like people could say, like, "Oh, you were fucked up the night before. That's why you had that."
Right? No, man.
No, like
No, it was just the end of the end, man. But
Right.
it was the means to the end. So, the only other thing that registered was he had acted out how he gave his life to God. Like in one of the 12-step things, it says, give your life and your will to God, and they changed that to like the God of your understanding or the God,
Sure.
your higher power. But for me, I know what God he was talking about,
Right.
Just because, my dad was a man of God. But anyways, he's gets on his knees in front of everybody, and he just like starts crying out and reenacting what he did to give his life over to God, and it just gave me the chills to the depths of my soul, right, and to the depths of my mind and my body as well. Like it was just chilling, and like when he was crying out, like I could see what he was holding up and he was giving to God, but I could see it in what I needed to do as well, to do what he did to get to God. And so he talks some more. I don't even know anything else he said, right? Like, and so I go straight from the meeting was over, and he's like, we should go, my mom's friend was like, we should go talk to him. I'm like, nope, get me home. I'm like, the whole time I'm going back and forth, literally like that cartoon. End your life. That was your dad. Give your life to God. End your life. Like, they were battling between my ears, man. So I go home, and my mom asked how the meeting was. I'm like, it was all right, whatever. And the friend went there, and he left, and I was on my mom's couch, and she was on the couch across the room, and I was once again like 90 pounds, and obviously, even though I had been sober for that amount of time, like when you're coming off all this stuff, like literally doctors, the amount of stuff in the drugs and alcohol,
Right.
I should have died from coming off of it, but
especially some of those pills.
yeah, man. And I was on some heavy duty pills. Anyways, get to my knees at the end of the couch, man. I'm just rocking. I'm trembling. Like it hurt. Like the pain and the hurt and all the suffering and all the wrong that I've done started just flooding through me, right? And all that wrong and all that hurt and that pain and the suffering and the monster I become is what wanted me to end my life. But now it's just like it was coming up in a different way. And I don't even know, man, like how long I was doing that for. Like the time frame was just I lost track of time, and I just put my hands up and I said, take this. And I swear to you, it was like the Passion of the Christ. There's a last scene when Jesus did what he did. And it shows the devil in hell screaming out. And I felt that scream come with inside of me and try to grab those words out of my mouth and pull them back in. Right? Because the devil knew he was losing me. And I almost gave up. Like, my mom was on the couch, right? And she's like, what'd you say, Scotty? Nothing, Mom, because I wanted to take it back. The devil was hitting me so hard. I wanted to take those words. He was trying to convince me to take those words back. And she said, what'd you say, Scotty? I said, nothing, Mom, nothing. She said, say it, Scotty, say it. I said, God, take this. She said, say it again, Scott. Say it again. God, please take this. So I was in the presence of God. I went from that I don't know how many times I said it. I don't know how many times my mom coached me to say it. She's like a cheerleader over there. Say it, say it. And I'm in the presence of God. What's that look like, Scott? I don't know how to explain it. I was in the presence of God. And it was nothing short of a miracle. Like I don't know if he just pulled back the curtains, or I was, I don't. He came onto that couch, but I was just in the presence of God. I knew it was God. And you would think someone would have a ton of questions to ask him, but I didn't really need to ask anything because I was in the presence of God. I knew everything that happened and the mistakes that I made that got me to that point, because I was simply in the presence of God. I knew I'd been played a fool. I knew I signed a deal with the devil. I knew I was the devil, one of the devil's number one recruits, right? And so then it just started pounding. The devil still kept trying to pound me. But you're going to prison. Like you can't come within 500 feet of your kids. Like you're a drug addict, this and that. And the voice just saying, just come to me. Just come to me. Just come to me. And then the next thing I remember is the sun was rising. And I had this peace and this love in my heart that I never had in my life. Right? And it felt like I was literally levitating above the couch. And of course, the devil was there, And I know the devil can only be at one place at one time, but he's visited me a few times, especially in my past life. But just pounding me, trying to get me this doubt that it really happened. Like, yeah, you were just super. No, I knew it did. And all those thoughts just kept, I'm in the hands of God. I'm in the hands of God. Right. And I really didn't know who God was. I was born and raised with some religion and some stuff, but the beautiful part of that morning was, and the funny part of that morning was, I didn't want to ever get off that couch because I was like, maybe it's
the
just
couch, bro.
right? Maybe it's like whatever, but maybe I'm gonna lose this. Maybe I'm gonna lose what I just been filled with. Like, and so, anyways, I had to go to the bathroom, man. Of all things, I had to go pee. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm afraid. I waited to the last minute, and I got off the couch, and I was like, okay, so I'm okay. And my mom had gone to bed at some point in that whole interim of the night, and she must have obviously worried. She probably didn't sleep that much, but she must have heard me get up, and she came out of her bed and ran into me in the hallway, and she literally just looked up at me. Now I'm that same person that I was the night before physically, right? And she said, "Oh my God, Scotty, what happened?" Right? She said I was glowing, right? And I was just like, I don't know, Mom, but I'm in the hands of God, right? And she was like a little Baptist, like, oh, praise the Lord,
That's
right?
Pentecostal. That's not Baptist.
Right,
That's Pentecostal.
Right. So that was the day, October 4th, 2011. The worst day of my life became the best day of my life. And, God had, obviously, God was always with me. He's always with everybody, and he's always around us, and he's just waiting for most of us just to turn our lives over to him, right?
So just like that, all the problems went away, right?
Yes. So here's
except you still had to deal with everything.
Here it
else.
is, in the promise that God made me, and because I did, although I said I didn't really need to ask questions when I was in the presence of him, I did, and every problem I had that was major, the addiction, the arrest, the restraining order. Like, I mean, there was a laundry list of them, and I had stopped asking him after he kept saying to me the same thing: just come to me. And it's the most beautiful part of the gospel. It's simple: just come to me. Seek my kingdom first. He didn't say this then, but it was one of the first things I learned. Seek my kingdom first and my righteousness, and all else will be given. And so once again, I just stayed, I'm all in. I'm an all in type of guy, right? So I was all in for everything, bikes, the success, the money, this and that. I got it. I was all in for the drugs. I got that too, right? You know what I mean? I was all in to end myself, and I almost did. But that last second, I made that split decision and I think everybody has that capacity. And I always say, we come from God, and there's that part of God that's in us that, we could spend a lifetime covering up with the sin and the dirt and what the devil wants to give us. But I don't think we can ever extinguish all of it, right? So I'll even joke around and say, I extinguished 99.999%, but there was still that 0.0001% of him in there.
Right.
And that's partially what made me cry out. And once again, when you're in the presence of God, there is no questions. There wasn't. So although I was still facing everything that I wanted to end my life over, God said he was going to take care of it. And I believed it. How could I not? Because I'm in the presence of him. It was such a beautiful thing to happen, right? It was a miracle. So once again, it was like, okay, it was literally the whole mama's couch thing. I was starting my life completely over at 40 years old.
Does she still have that same couch?
She does. Right? She ain't never getting rid of that couch. And maybe that'll be the ministry. We'll take more people that are ready to end their life to that couch, right? But obviously that's what we do now.
Mama's couch.
Yeah. So, I was all in, and that's why I say our biggest blessings can be our biggest curse, but our biggest curse can also become the biggest blessing. And what the devil uses to try to destroy us or use us for bad, God can always turn it for good. And so, like, I just stayed focused on his promises that night. I felt that peace. I felt that tranquility. I felt what I always desired. I obviously felt God's love. I think one of the biggest reasons why we self-destruct is because we learn to hate ourselves. if the devil can convince you to hate yourself, steal your identity, you said that earlier, right? He steals our identity. We're the suckers that allow him to do that, our identity in Christ. I was not created to be a horrible father. I was not created to be an alcoholic. I was not created to be a drug addict. I just fell into the wrong path, and the wrong guy was leading it. So,
I mean, that's incredible, obviously, like to and I'm sure that this was almost 14 years ago now.
yeah.
So I'm sure that path wasn't an easy one still, even with God on your side. Like, you still had to go through all of that aspect.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of the outcomes of that. Where are you at now with your relationships with your kids and things like that?
Kids are back, right? So unfortunately, my wife at the time, who's now my ex-wife, we are friends, and we have 3 kids, and so we have a good mutual relationship to raise them up, and so my daughter is 21 years old. She's on her own. She's a little genius, and so that's the thing that you mentioned earlier. If I would have taken my life, where would your kids be, right? And that's why my passion is when I hear somebody is suicidal or a drug addict or somebody like myself, like that's what gets me up in the morning to continue to do what we do in the ministry. So I went into discipleship immediately, which was just learning about Jesus. I wanted to know, okay, who is this? Okay, what is God about? I got an old Bible out, you know what I mean? And I started fumbling through that, but I know I had a communication line with God, which was important. So I kept communicating. And so when things, and I was still facing those different charges, and some of them were in local. So I just stayed faithful, learn about God, seek his kingdom, started, going through the Bible. And this time, when I'm starting to read it, like, it's piercing me, right? So a lot of people say, yeah, I read the Bible, but they're not really digesting it because of their mindset or maybe where they're at in their walk. But, now I'm starting to read it, and it's just like, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to my Father except through me. Like the truth, that scripture right there, they give me chills. Like when I read it for the first time and I understood it, and now it's just like my life and the life with the devil and drugs and alcohol and that whole debauchery, it's all a lie.
You believed it.
Yes.
Because that's key. If you believe it, it has meaning. But if you don't, it's just words on a page.
Absolutely.
So daughter's 21. She's genius.
Yes, she's genius. She's in honors college at Kent State University, and she's studying to be a Christian psychologist.
No
right?
kidding. That's awesome.
Yes, yeah.
Well, at least hopefully she's listening to this. Do not prescribe the drugs.
Prescribing,
right, definitely. And so
I'm sure she's got some interesting feedback on that too, because I'm sure going through school, like I'm just interested. Like, she knows your firsthand experience with psychology. I'm sure you shared a lot of this with her.
So, and she was the oldest. Like, when I stopped in 2011, I was converted. My son, Caden, who's now 17, he was only like 5. He was 5 or 6, so he didn't remember so much of the monster.
Hopefully.
Right.
Hopefully,
I actually talked to him about him.
I was just saying, do you ever talk to him about that dark spot?
Caden he rides with me,
right?
So he hears firsthand on stage, right? He's right front and center. And there's so many times I was preaching in a church a month ago, and there were some parts of my story that like even when I'm preaching, like if my son's there, like in the middle of the sermon I was given. Like, it had to do with him. He used to wake up and say, "Sunny day." He used to come out of his room and say, "Sunny day, Dad." Sunny day. Just wanted to do something, but I would be too. And so, anyways, I was like in the middle of like just a month ago. I said, "Caden, I know you remember when you used to say sunny day, and I'm so sorry, right?" And it like just added to the whole presentation. And he's like, "Yeah, Dad, I remember." I said, "You know what? You were always right." And every day is a sunny day. And everybody started going, "Yeah," you know what I mean? So
that's awesome.
So like, I don't hide anything from them. Obviously, I deliver it, when it's appropriate. And my 2 oldest ones, Kai was obviously around 10 or 11. She does remember quite a bit of it, but I talk them through it. And then once again, I want them to know the story.
Of course.
Because I want them, and, Kaya had gotten baptized a couple years ago, and she's, her and I are doing Bible studies in over the phone, of course, because she's so busy. And Caden lives with me full time, and he's always, he's in Grafton with me. He's a stunt rider, right?
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting, because you mentioned 3 kids, but the first 2, so you have your daughter's 21. She's going to be a psychiatrist, which we just talked about. Psychologist.
Yeah.
So we just talked about that whole experience,
Yes.
right? And then now your son, you told me before the show, you said he's one of the top stunt riders
for his age.
in the country, right?
Yeah.
17 years old.
Yes.
And your 3rd child?
Yes, so that's Christian. He's 9 and
Oh, he's a youngin' still.
Yeah, he's youngin'.
So he's just learning that balance.
Yeah. So we actually did a show Saturday at a Harley dealership, and I bring my kids out, and it's like, it's like I'm the dad duck, and my little ducklings follow me, And
So he's on a bike already.
Oh
then.
yeah, man. Yeah, he's part of the show. He's like, he's got the evil Knievel, like, I'm trying to navigate him through his ego, right? Because I'm like, okay, we got to watch this ego thing, because it got your dad in a lot of trouble. But he's out there signing autographs and handing out posters, and
cool.
he'll ride by, and he's got the old Starboy dad look. I used to stare people down, thinking I was so cool, and I'd be like, and so he rides by doing his little stunts, and he's staring. It's so crazy, man. Like,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I mean,
so let's talk about the downfall of the Starboyz has now become the Ride4Life.
Yeah, so that was part of the transition. It was a tough one, but that was part of the it's a relationship, and this is what we preach. And my brother Rich over there, same thing. Like, there's a difference between church and religion and denominations and stuff versus like a relationship with Christ, right? And that's what truly makes the difference. A lot of people, everybody says they believe in God, right? Like, not everybody, but most people. I'm like, okay. And then where you usually lose them is say, okay, what does Jesus mean to you? Yeah, and I'm like,
well, it's even like when you said earlier, like some people read the Bible. I'm like, yeah, like everybody that goes to church.
yeah.
Reads the Bible.
Yeah,
Like,
I came out of it. The church
Bible?
from my childhood
Yeah.
was the hypocritical ones.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where they
Yeah,
all do
where they're
their,
like,
they
oh,
all
we-
do their things and this and that.
We all go to church on Sunday, but they're like, "Did you
Yeah.
see what
Yeah.
what the couple was wearing
Yes.
today in
There's a
church?" Like, they're
difference.
judging the second they
Yes.
walk out of there,
Or they're stepping over the guy that the homeless guy.
Right.
You know
right?
what I mean?
Exactly. Or they're in line and they're
Yes.
like, 100%. Like, so that's always been my thought of like the church in general,
Yes.
because unfortunately, those folks outnumber the people that are there.
Yes.
That had the relationship that just, and because like you said, like that, what's that relationship look like? Well, it means you can't pass judgment. It means like so, and we talk
live
about
like
all
Jesus.
the time, like, the dagger in the eye.
Yes. The splinter.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like you talk like these different aspects of what that is. It's interesting to hear that, multiple people now between you, David, yourself, Rich, has come on. It's like more about the
The
relationship.
difference is like the brokenness of how I came to Christ and how Scott came to Christ, how David came to Christ. There's a difference when you've been through the ringer, when you've been lying in your own filth and you've been broken to the point of losing absolutely everything. And the only thing you have left is to reach up and say, help me, please. Either save me or kill me or do something because I can't take this anymore. When you meet Christ in that area, it's different for that Christian than it is for the,
Isn't it?
And I'm not trying to diminish
No, of course
the
not.
person that was raised in Christian church camp and things like that, or went through Awana and has always been in a relationship with the Lord. God values that person just as much. But for me, like, there's nothing that I won't do now for him because he's done everything for me to save me.
Yes.
Right.
And that's the monster, the depth of the monster I became is almost an advantage on this side. Just exactly what you're saying, right?
Do you remember when we first met? Because I don't. It's
Great. Thanks, Rich.
Wow.
No,
You know
because-
what? I don't
Guess you
either.
weren't that big of-
Who are you? Who are you?
I
Is it
don't
right now?
remember.
Did it
I
just
don't
happen?
remember the first event that we actually
I think-
talked to each other.
Yeah,
but
it was, at
Bill
Noble.
Glass.
It was
wasn't
at Noble.
Okay.
Because I remember you were just your charisma, like you stood out because you have the same kind of personality I do.
Oh, it's
like
not because he was dressed as a ramen noodle.
He was
pack?
dressed something weird. Though. He
I actually did have another ramen noodle.
You had some airbrush, crazy, gaudy shirt on.
That was I had a Heath Ledger
Yes,
as the
the Joker.
Joker.
Yes.
And on the back it says "Life's no joke," and I had all these signatures from guys like. That were doing life in prison, guys I knew, but I got that when I walked out in 2011. I got out of prison in 2011, the same year
That's
you guys
crazy.
did.
Wow, small
Isn't
world.
that cool?
Yeah.
But the reason I even asked, like, do you remember? Because I know we've been to a bunch of events
Yes.
together. There's even an event that we did at a Harley Davidson shop
Yes.
where my metal band,
Played.
Stillwood Drive, played all the background music in the
video.
film. There's a video.
Well, that was
Is that accessible?
Yes, it is. It was a COVID video. It was during the shutdown when we weren't allowed to come out. We had, I was just at the height of like launching like our ministry independently, and I was just getting called in a deeper kind of follow up.
It's because it's Ride for Life now.
Yeah, and so we did that COVID event at Youngstown Harley. And we did it for the inmates because they didn't have any outsiders.
Right,
they were locked up for
right.
a year to 2 years without any.
Oh, so you guys recorded it?
And then they put it on the
that's
tablets.
pretty cool.
And
then
it went
it's,
into
you know
the
what the
prison.
tablets did? It was crazy. That was reminiscent of the Starboyz. I kept getting calls from different prisons in Ohio that, hey, and actually one of my buddies shot photos of it. I don't know how, probably shouldn't say that. Sent me photos of like 30, 40 guys around one dude's tablet watching that video, just like they did with the original Starboyz
That's
video.
crazy,
But it was
dude.
in prisons. And we just shot a video saying, hey, we love you. We haven't forgot about you. Rich came with his band and we just had a bunch of anti-COVID people showed up and, we threw together
That's
any means
awesome.
necessary. Yeah.
So what is Ride for Life now? You mentioned a couple times you went to the ministry process.
Yeah, so the whole thing, that the migration from Starboyz to Ride for Life, like I was just being obedient to God. And that's another thing that separates a lot of people from relationship with Christ is they don't want to be obedient to everything God is telling you to do. And what do I mean by that? Read the New Testament, right? It's just like some of the things that you said. People always kind of use that, well, everybody falls short from the glory of God or nobody's perfect as an excuse to continue to do the sinning that they want to sin.
Right.
So a lot of people go and open the Bible up and they pull the pieces out that they want, which are the promises, but they don't want to necessarily read the pages that He's telling you what you need to do to get them. Right. So a relationship is just like, any other relationship we have. It's got to be mutual. You want to, especially if you're dealing with, God himself and the author of life, you need to do what he's telling you to do to receive what ultimately he wants to give you. And like Rich said, like I was all in. Like he gave me that peace, that freedom that I desired for my whole life.
Yeah, what do I got to do to
Right.
return it?
And I never want to lose it. So I'm going to do everything to a T. I'm not going to use everybody falls short from the glory of God. I'm not going to say, well, nobody's perfect. I'm going to strive for perfection in Christ. I'm going to strive for that bullseye. Yeah, I'll never hit it, but I'm going to strive for it. I'm not going to waver because I never want to taste that past life again. I never want to be separated from him again. And obviously it says in the Bible, once you're in his hand, you'll always be in his hand as long as you commit to him. But I'm all in, man. So, first couple years, like it was restoration, it was going through, and there was a lot of times where know what God has planned for me because I kept praying. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? I'm washed up stunt rider. Like, do I go back to school? Do I do this? Do I do that? And I was on my mom's couch. All the money was gone. Everything was gone. Houses were in foreclosure. Like literally starting life all over again. But deep down, no matter how hard the devil was trying to attack me with the negativity, I knew what God promised me. Just come to me. Come to me. I kept coming to him. What does that mean? Prayer, read the scripture, learn more about him. I started going into wherever Jesus was happening. I started going. And a lot of it was in Northeast Ohio. Like, it was just the happening places. And I kept praying for God to send me mighty men into my life. The one thing I lacked as Starboyz was an accountability partner or a mentor. Right. And so I said I was a businessman, but I threw it all away. And not that anything would have changed because I was meant to do that, but I knew first and foremost, I need some mighty men of God to help me. I know I can never make a good decision if my life depended on it, right? So I need to surround myself. How do you surround yourself? I started asking God to send him in. So slowly but surely, he started restoring, right? And I'm going to these court cases, right? And at some point, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be preaching the gospel as an inmate or, having the access to come in and out. But God had said, I've saved you, Scotty. Go tell the world. Take your bike when I tell you to and start in prison. So I'm like, okay. You know what I mean? But that was on my mom's, I was still living on my mom's house. I'm like,
He's like, how am I going to get there?
But the same drive I had in my past life to do and get what I wanted, I just applied it towards God, right? So those first couple years from 11, 12, 13, I was going like in the full discipleship mode, and I really didn't even know what that mean. I was just the whole thing that we preach now and that I try to do with people, even if they're Christian or believe in God, is like, okay, are you right? Are you in an active relationship with him? Are you receiving all the things that he wants to give you? And the main way to find that out is, do you have peace and freedom up here, right? And that's sustainable. It doesn't, you can have that even if you're losing everything. You can have that even if you're on your mom's couch, right? And that's the part that helps us fall in love with him. So when I start doing the stuff that I did with the ministry, especially the follow-up programs that I launched, it was simply to try to help people enter a relationship with God, to Christ, and to fall in love with him. How do you do that? You learn about him. And you have somebody to help guide you. Who's the guide? Well, in Rich's case, it's him. In my case, it's me, right? Who's the best person to guide somebody than the person that is leading them to Christ in the first place? So I take my bike, I'm calling prisons back in the day, right? And I still have a fresh arrest record, and all my arrest records towards the end were drugs, cocaine, this and that. So, pull up some pictures, you pull up Starboyz Scott and my arrest sheet and my, being processed, and the pictures are up. And mugshots. And so these prisons are probably, I'm like, hey, listen, I'm Scott Caraboolad, and, some of them recognize Starboyz Scott, like some of them, but I'm sure they look it up and like, is this guy kidding? You can imagine I didn't get phone calls back.
Well, it's interesting because when I was trying to look up some stuff before the show tonight, I was actually pulled up an article where you had done a show in, I took a note. I can't remember where it was at, but they wanted you to come back until the fact that the local police department.
Yeah, Albion.
Yes.
New York.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you did a show there, and then they wanted you to come back, and then the local police department fought against it because they knew who you were.
But guess what we did?
They thought you were still associated with the Starboyz. They saw some stuff on a website, which obviously, it was like F the police and stuff like that. I mean, when you're writing like you guys did, that was like
but that was the irony of like me in general. Like I was law enforcement hater number one, and that FTP logo, as you can imagine, was not. It was.
Well, look at the shirt, cops lie, right?
Yeah. I mean, we sold hundreds of thousands of those things over 15 years, all across the world, right? And the FTP one is, F the police. And so, I was like, public enemy number one against law enforcement. And it's not ironic. God's got me working in the highest law enforcement places in the world.
Well, it was, I saw what you had said in the article, and it like, that was a former version of myself.
Yeah.
Like,
well, what I did and what I do is I always have people set up a meeting. I said, set up a meeting. Because they had called me, and the first year was so successful. We did like a little tour of that place because it was at the height of the drug epidemic, So all these small towns that weren't used to seeing addiction issues are now, bringing in freezer trucks because of the body. So, the timing was perfect for our ministry as well because we came into full swing just when that epidemic hit America. So who better to help people than one that experienced it? So we were going all over the country doing all these hope festivals and hope over heroin festivals and stuff like that. And so like I went from, once again, it was kind of like very similar to the Starboyz success, but in a good way, So I came out of that discipleship 2014. That year, like I maybe only did 6 or 7 events. 2000, do I get my years right? Yeah, 15 is when that epidemic really started to come in. They thought it was heroin. But then they were finding out it was the whole fentanyl stuff. And so anyways, we just started and then also I started getting access, and it was through Bill Glass, to the prisons. And so it was all surreal. It was all miracles because of my checkered past. And even like that article, you know,
Right.
some people would start complaining, well, do you know what this guy used to stand for, what he used to do? And so I said, you know, they said that they could no longer endorse or support somebody that made a living off of, someone that made a gain off of bringing negative attention to law
Anti-police,
enforcement, right?
Yeah.
So I said, and I drove, I think it's 7 hours. I said, set up a town meeting and I'll come up there. And I went up there and I probably preached one of the most powerful messages I ever preached. Because, fortunately they did record it, but none of the police department showed up. And, you know, I took them back to, you know, their statement was that, you know, that I gained something from that life of being, you know, anti-police. And I said, you know, I brought him full circle. Like, I never gained anything. I sold my soul to the devil. Like, if you would have asked one of my kids if daddy made a profit, you know,
Right.
spiritually or so off that lifestyle when I was that, no. And so like everybody was crying, and it was, and so anyways, they ended up permitting it, and the show went on, and it was successful and stuff like that. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was just one door open. That first year we did like 7 events. It was awkward, man. Like God said, you know, never ride your bike again without getting on the tank or grabbing a microphone and telling your story about me. And so like, you know, here I'm like, okay. And I didn't have a problem talking ever in my past life, but it definitely was not about God or, you know, about exposing my darkest inner, you know, secrets or chaos. But, you know, one thing led into another, and it was just, you know, I started seeing people like fall, like in a good way. You know, I just started telling my story, and just the first time I got a picture of it, man, like the first time I ever did that, it was still Starboyz Scott, and we were still advertising as Starboyz back in 2014, and went to this little town out of Indiana. And we did the stunt show, which was easy. And I remember like, oh gosh, I'm just gonna go home because I did not want to talk. Right? I'm like, everybody was meeting on the side of the outside the fire.
So this was still Starboyz Scott they were advertising.
Yeah,
as.
like because there was still kind of that transitional year between walking away from Starboyz and starting Ride4Life.
Well, yeah, nobody's heard of Ride4Life.
Yeah, and I thought originally it was going to be Starboyz Ride4Life, the new edition, but then God said, "Hey, Scott, you can't polish it." He didn't say this, but it was like,
right.
You can't polish like it's something that is so tarnished.
Right.
Anyways, I ended up walking away from it in 2015. But you know, that first event there is like really when I saw like having this anointing or this ministry type of power that God was using me for to help others. And you know, it was crazy. It was like this big festival. It was a 4th of July festival, and the whole town was open containers and stuff like that. And I'm like, what? They're all coming down there with, you know, and God has obviously dialed me in to talk to whoever at any capacity. And I don't ever throw Bibles at people's foreheads, or I don't ever like say, you can't do this. Like I just, you know, especially, you know, we do shows at Quaker Steak and Lube, and I give a message. I deliver it a little bit differently. And I said, you know, there was a time.
I was there for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there for that. Yeah.
There was a time in my life where I could handle drinking, then there wasn't. So if you're in that category, nothing against me telling you that you can't drink, but you know, if you can't handle it now. And so, you know, it was one of those moments that was really just drove me, you know, even deeper into the relationship. This guy like behind me, someone said I was done speaking. It was very hard and awkward for me to do that. And God always confirmed that I was doing the right thing. This guy just was weeping behind me, and he was suicidal. He was alcoholic and just struggling. He just like fell into my arms, man. And it was like,
Wow.
And we have someone caught a picture of it, but it was like, this was what I was created to do.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? And that was 14. So then, you know, we officially launched a ministry in 15. And
You said that you couldn't polish something that was so tarnished, right?
yeah,
And I think it's interesting because I'm looking up here on the Google search on the screen where it's Starboyz, and you see the picture on the upper left, and then the next one, and you go down and you see this. What does this 666 have to do with a search for the Starboyz?
that's
a rare
our
Starboyz FTP shirt.
I see.
no, that's
Look at that.
That was I made that was our last video. We made
Isn't
6.
that something?
We made 6, and I was I was demonic there, bro.
Yeah.
It was in the.
I see.
It was 2000 and it would have been right around 7 or 8 when
Man, they're
things
getting
got
$46 for that DVD.
Do you remember, hey, Scott, you know the show The Chosen?
bad. Yes.
And have you seen that, Will? Have you seen The Chosen?
No.
So the
don't think so.
opening of The Chosen, which has become very, very popular right now, The Chosen. But the opening shows fish swimming in a
Yes.
circle, right? And then one fish
Yes, I love it.
turns around and starts swimming
Yes.
against all the other fish because it got impacted. And this is kind of like the 180 that you did from 666
Yeah.
and kind of your allegiance to Satan to now having Ride4Life.
Yeah, that's a sick story.
It is.
So 2016, 17.
Yes, we go full swing into the ministry. 14 is when I was starting to give up calling the prisons, just because I was like, okay, whatever. But not. I just physically stopped. I didn't stop praying for it. And then someone that knew the Starboyz that I passed 100 times on the highways, like
Right.
he must have heard me speak somewhere. It was Jeff Ayton, right, Rich, and
Yeah.
he was still working at Chick-fil-A. He said, I said, man, Jeff, like God has just put it on my heart. And I'd been talking to him a few times. And, when people talk to me, people will naysay and be like, especially back then, they're like, no, he's just working an angle. He's just trying to blah, blah, blah. And so I just ignored it and just kept doing what I was doing. But that's why I always say, set up a meeting. Let me sit face to face with this person.
Right.
And so I went to Chick-fil-A and I sat across from him, and he was going down to Belmont the very next day. And I said, man, God is telling me. And it was like a burning bush moment. It wasn't like, there's times where God talks to me, it's like he stamps it right in my mind and my heart. And then there's times where it's like, a little more subtle, but there's a lot of times, and that was one of them. He said he wants me in prisons. Like, I don't know. He's like, well, I'm going down to Belmont. And, he was sitting in front of the board to discuss them and the year coming up. And he says, I'll propose it to him. And he even then was kind of doubtful because I wanted to take a whole stunt show in the middle of the prison yard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
Right?
thinking about this process.
Right?
Of prisons
And
letting
still,
you in.
I'm like, once again, you look up Scott Caraboolad or Starboyz Scott, and it's still pretty fresh, all my arrest records and stuff like that. But anyways, he goes down there and he literally, called me as soon as he left that meeting. He said, Scott, I can't believe it. They all said yes.
It's
right?
amazing.
And so we went down, and obviously, Rich, you've been there. You we're able, because of the motorcycle stunt show, like the whole yard comes out, right? So
It's really, really more powerful than our words are going to be able to paint a picture on a podcast. When you get 2,000 guys on a yard screaming and yelling and just the energy, and then you're doing one of those blowouts.
yes,
Those are amazing, where you just burn the tire till it blows,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you see purple smoke,
yeah,
and it fills the yard, and you can smell it and feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some energy there.
So-
And what that does is that opens up
there you go.
men's hearts.
Amen.
So that when we get up after the show and we tell them our stories about how Christ has changed us, they're more apt to listen to men
Sure.
who bring such energy like that.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really
Yeah.
amazing.
And just the outlaw, having that outlaw past, like, we roll in there and you got a motorcycle stunt show, which has never been seen in a prison yard before. And it's surreal. Like, we obviously started going in there first with another ministry, Bill Glass, and we would be a platform guest, and I'd take a couple riders in there. And then once again, it was just like, I didn't know what to expect. I'm used to huge shows, so, but still being in the middle of the prison yard, even then I was the same way. I'm like, I was down at Belmont that night before. I'm like,
Was this your first show, Belmont? Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going in there. Oh, this is crazy, right? And I'm like, and then we roll the bikes in there, and the volunteers are in there, and I remember standing next to the main CO or the main guard there, and he's like, "Are you ready?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." And he laughed at me. He said, "Open 1, open 2," and all these 2,000, 2,500 inmates start coming out, and I look down at his belt line and I'm like, you don't even have a gun, dude. He's got like this tiny can of mace. I'm like, are they going to stop? And he just kept laughing, right? But obviously that was the genius behind, you know, God's plan to take a motorcycle stunt guy into the prisons is, first of all, you're drawing everybody. What inmate is going to pass up a stunt show? But then obviously the hook is like, okay, this guy's going to jump on a stage or on a bike and just tell his testimony, which obviously they can all relate with. You know,
Right? Yeah,
and
they all gambled and lost.
yeah.
Right?
So fast forward, we just go. You know, we've done that for several years, just working with other ministries, and not just in the prisons, like all over, like with the the drug stuff, the drug epidemic stuff as well. But like my heart was obviously, and that's the first command that he gave me was start in the prisons, reach the street and the kids as well. But I just fell in love with that prison atmosphere, right? Like, and just throughout the years of working with the other ministries, there was just God was tugging on my heart to go back and off the bikes, and so I started developing like a expedited discipleship program, just because. And there's a lot of great programs. Rich, obviously is involved with two huge ministries that have been in there for years, but I just felt the calling. Like if these guys are specifically kind of when Rich speaks, he's drawn people to his story, and those people want to hear more of Rich's story, right? It's all about Jesus, but Jesus is using him to get to, and so same thing. Like he can reach people that I probably can't reach, or vice versa.
Right.
And so obviously, when we started doing those, you ask the people after the show to step forward if they want to change their life, and you do a sinner's prayer or you do a fresh start prayer, and you're getting 400 or 500 guys to step forward in a prison yard. Like, it's like, okay, it's great. And one of the elders told me, they're meeting Jesus at the train station, but the important part, as we know, is they need to get on the train as well, right?
Discipleship.
Yeah, and that's the disciple. So I started writing this discipleship program just based off of the stuff I was doing.
Tell them the name of it.
It's called Trench Warfare.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and it was truly designed like, and not that, people are worse in worse spots than others.
Sure.
And it was a war for me. And it wasn't just over like your lunch money or a loaf of bread. Like, this was for my life. And that's what the devil wants, to take your life, right? And ultimately steal, kill, and destroy. So for me, I write a lot of my stuff. It's very aggressive. It's very like this person we're dealing with might not be here tomorrow. Right. And so the reality of what we're facing, whether it's in a prison or through the epidemic, we would lead people to Christ and they would be dead the next day. And this is stuff that just started happening.
That's a reality.
Yeah.
That's a reality.
Yeah. And the same thing goes for prisons, man. The prisons aren't as bad. Most of them aren't as bad as what you see on TV and stuff. But, you just, for me, I was given that second chance, and I'm going to do all I can to honor God, to make sure it stays passionate. And that also, like I said, God's like, Scott, you need to go back. I'm like, and so I it was noble. And I called Jeff and I said, Jeff, like, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but God is calling me to come back off my bike just to talk to these guys. I said, I just wanted to get your permission, so I'm not doing anything behind. He said, no, you got our blessing. We do this part, and we stick with that. And so I made a call down to the warden down there, and he said, anything you want to do, Scott, in this prison, because he witnessed some miracles with the bikes and stuff. And so we hung up some posters, and he texted me a week later and said 475. I'll never forget it. I'm like, what does that mean? He said 475 guys signed up to come hear you talk, right? So we started going down there and just
Gymnasium.
Yes. Yes. And so then right after COVID, fast forward, we were doing quite a few events a year and in and out of prisons with other ministries and stuff like that. And then I started writing this program in the back of my mind. Just once again, there's a lot of great programs there, but I just felt like if we're gonna be that conduit, or I'm gonna be that person, then I need to be the person to go back. And so we just started doing the same type of yard parties, and we just did one at Grafton on Friday. And, we were going back on Tuesday and starting a new class up. And,
Awesome.
We'll probably have over 100 guys in that class.
Awesome.
So let me ask you this. I got a couple of questions, and we're going to wrap things up.
Yeah.
One, what's the wristband? I see you got the bandana around your
Yeah.
wrist. Is there a meaning behind that? 'Cause I see you grab it a couple times.
Yeah. It's, after it goes back to when I lost my dad, right? He had one on his Harley, right? And so I took that thing off and I wore it everywhere. Like if you watch all the Starboy videos, I always have a bandana somewhere, and it's just you know,
Always been your thing.
yeah, it just symbolizes like my dad with me, you know what I mean? And just, you know, I always have like 2 or 3 on me now. And it's just kind of, it became synonymous with like my image back then. Everybody started putting bandanas in their back pockets or tying them around their bikes or tying them around their
Right
arms.
on.
Yeah.
All right. So 2.
And I cry a lot too. So.
Yeah. Well, obviously there's a whole bunch to your story that resonates, and I know you're going into prisons and stuff like that right now, which is awesome. The fact that Prisoners One, they're able to get this show and hear this this man talk that's obviously been through things just as bad as them, but unfortunately you're also the guy that got away got away with it.
Yeah.
And then found, you know, your freedom and peace with the Lord. Have you thought of breaking out on that at all and doing anything? Because I think the bigger part of your message is the mental health aspect.
Yeah.
Right. And when I say that is I've had this conversation with Rich before. My big thing in life is like there's not more people doing things for the youth before they fall off the edge. Have you thought about doing this for like schools?
Yes.
And just having the conversation specifically around like, hey, there's a lot in your life, right? Like you're dealing with all this different emotions and things like that. And now you have digital things like iPads and stuff like, but don't be in a rush to just take the medicine that the psychiatrist gives you. Like have someone to talk to, find, you know, and even at that aspect of it's find the Lord.
So yes, I have your answer, man. And it's something that, you know, maybe this podcast can help get us back into. So, you know, the marching order that God gave me was start in the prisons, but he also added 2 more elements. I want you in the streets, preaching on the streets, which we still do street events, even like Harley yesterday. Or Quaker Steak and Lube. But then he said, reach the youth. And even on our slogans, it's prison, street, and youth. And so we used to do a lot of youth stuff. And we did school assemblies all over the country. Like even that one in Albion, you know, like we would do 3 or 4 schools, and then we did night shows. And so, and I adjust my message. You know, the advantage that God has given me, and he's also like confirmed, is like it's okay to leave me behind the curtains in certain aspects. Like once again, if we're at Quaker Steak and Lube, I'm not coming out there hallelujah and slamming people with Bibles.
Sure.
Like it's about love and finding that connection. And obviously, the biggest struggle I had was mental health, right? And I exhausted every means possible to try to find that solution. So in a lot of ways, I'm not in a huge rush to get people to what I know now is the answer in a undistasteful way, right? So we were doing tons of school assemblies before COVID, right? And then COVID, and it was brilliant. Like in there, like. So I always have chilling stories. I'm probably the king of chilling stories. But anyways, and all glory,
tied into your emotions.
And all glory to God though. But there was times where like we would be in a school assembly and they were amazing. I got some videos I'll send you. Like all these kids would be glued to the stunt show, right? And then we would do them outside in the parking lot. It was only an hour long. And I would jump on the stage and I would talk about right and wrong. You know, I would talk about the stuff that's biblical, but just leave God out of it. But there was so many times where like, you know, and I would always interact with the kids, and it was just like, those kids know trauma, man. And they would just like one time, like, you know, I would go like the kettle, don't let that kettle boil over. Don't, you know, talk about anti-bullying and stuff like that. And not being embarrassed to share your emotions with the right people. And this little kid just like raises, and I was making that example of that pot boiling over, and he raises his hand like he was in the middle of the group and just said, yeah, I know what you're saying. And I didn't even ask a question. He just raised his hands. I'm like, yeah. And he said both of his parents just got murdered the week before.
Oof.
Right?
Holy shit.
Yeah. And he just, I think I'm boiling over. He just lost it, man. And then the whole school were just all there. And I like look up at the principal, and we make eye contact, because it was like,
yeah, like
we didn't prepare for this. to go so deep so fast, you know. And she swooped him up, and you know, and once again, there's obviously a line between church and state at those kind of facilities.
Well,
but the message is definitely real, and I can definitely take them to that raw side of that.
Well, you know, and yeah, of course, you talk about religion and stuff like that, and church and state, and obviously, not every part of your story has to be necessarily about the leading to God, because I think people find that path in their own way.
Yes.
Like, I think one of the things that chases people away from church or from God or a relationship with them is people telling them they have to do it, or this is the better way, or you can't have a good life without
the
it,
condemnation,
right?
Or,
And then it's
or the
like
fire and brimstone, and I'm never like that, man.
Dude, I could have a great life without God. I'm having a great life. Why are you telling me that I have to do it that way? And it like just pushes you further and further away, right? But the other aspect of it is I think about all the parts of your story, and we're a different generation, right? We didn't grow up on cell phones in school. We didn't grow up on iPads. We didn't have video games all night, every night for hours, talking to people all over the country on a controller and headphones.
Right.
We have YouTube to keep our attention for hours upon hours. So I guess where I'm getting at is like a lot of the problems that kids face today, you didn't necessarily face. And yet you still, I mean, you had happy home. Your parents were married until your dad passed, right? You grew up in that loving household. You're all these benefits, and still had bad decisions. But in the meantime, your kids are like where probably 50% of kids are today, where parents are divorced. There's somebody in the household that has some kind of an addiction issue. So having your son accompany you to these shows, which you said he's already doing the stunt riding with you now. Yeah. But then I guarantee you there's 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids who would just look at your son as like, how did you deal with it? Or how are things now? Or, you know, how can I help my dad? Or, you know, different aspects to that could really kind of expand on what you guys are doing. Well, there's just so much out there right now that's telling kids to
do the wrong thing.
Right.
Yes. And go to the wrong direction.
Yeah. You know, you have such a passion for kids. This isn't the first time you've talked about
because I feel like there's so much stacked against them.
And it's good. It's almost better to start with them.
Well,
right?
hang on a minute. Why don't you do some version of guys' nights for the kids?
Yeah, so we've thought about that actually, because like I was like, oh, you know, we have like
all you gotta do is cut out the cussing,
like that. Right? What? Yeah, with these kids these days, they know more words than I know.
Yes.
Right?
Even so,
like it's like people are like, oh, do you have the birds and the bees conversation with your kids yet? And I'm like, dude, at 9 years old, I feel like every kid knows more about sex than I did. Like at 20.
Yeah. I mean, they're exposed to everything.
We've actually thought about doing something like that, because even like from a business perspective, like my neighbor across the street, his dad's a sheriff, and he runs a landscaping company at 14 years old.
Jeez.
Has like 20 contracts right now. What? You know, and his brother comes home from college in the summer. They just bought a truck for the first time, and like they go from job site to job site all summer long. And I'm like, man, good for that kid, dude. Like, and he mows my lawn. I mean, shoot, I haven't mowed my lawn in 3 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talked about having different kids on to tell their story and stuff like that. The problem is then you have to like protect yourself a little bit differently.
You have to get a liability signature from
and it's just like you have to worry about like, but you're in a basement with a grown man for an hour on a podcast. Like what?
You can bring certain contacts on here to talk about certain issues. Like I'm going to give you an example. I have a guy, Stanley Frankart. Stanley was a gang member, shot a guy in the face straight through the cheek, and it didn't kill the guy, and he did 9 years in prison. And when he was getting stomped out in a day room, he found Christ. Now, he's got a ministry. He's a youth pastor at a local large church, and he started a program called Young Christian Professionals. And he's a good, solid friend of mine. Yeah. I can get him on the show. Yeah, but guys like that to talk about youth issues of today, something that we can hone toward youth. But you have a passion for that. This isn't the first time I heard you mention youth.
Yeah, it's hard not to.
And that's awesome, because what that tells me, like when I do my ministry, what I like to do is catch guys getting off the bus, before the compound swallows
Right.
the inmate and, spits back out a statistic. I want to catch them and try to steer them a different way and say, hey, listen, you can make some solid choices now and avoid those troubles now before you get into them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's always everybody's kind of got a niche on what they're looking for. I think the biggest thing for me when it comes to the youth is it's like you hear like all these paths that people go on, especially some of the guys that you've brought in with Rich now and others that we've talked to, and it's like, I mean, these kids are making these decisions on where their life. And like I said, my daughter's 16. Like I can see as early as 12 where like the 20s are going to be for my daughter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we do go into the juvenile prison, and they're 12, 14 years old.
Already made their
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah.
Whether it
and
was
I
their
loved
fault
the
or
juvenile.
whether it was their decision or their parents' decision because of the
Yes.
situation they were in, it's like just having people speak to these youth. And I when you mentioned your son is a stunt rider and then he goes to these things with you, I was like, man, I bet you there's a lot of kids that would love hearing, like, even if you didn't speak and he just spoke about what his experience.
And we're working on telling his story now just over social media, the social media platform. So I've been talking to some people about helping get his side of the story, right?
That's awesome.
And obviously it's a blessing because he's got both sides, right? And then he also is exposed to what I'm doing.
So a little bit easier this time to create a business model with all the stuff that's out there with social media and stuff like that, or is it just as hard?
He still has a big helmet tied, a big camera tied to a helmet. He still has that.
I actually like had the social media phobia, man. So like I'm just starting to work with some people that I wanted to sit on it and do it right. So I really haven't launched social media for Ride4Life. It's out there, but I really haven't, pounded that yet. But I definitely, I have so much footage from my past life and so much from this life that like we are working on a plan to like, the contrast is everything in it's in any Jesus story that's extreme, right? So I want to like and I'll post some of the old clips but I use them to kind of say, okay, here we are now. But it's a great contrast. And I'm working with some guys that are going to try to help me put it together and really flood social media. So right now, my social media has just kind of like been pretty, I just waiting for that.
Yeah.
Right. I want to
so
do it right.
you've got like a social media guy that's going to come in and he's going to be doing all the editing and stuff
just,
like that for
you. And there's a part of me that wants to, it's not my wheelhouse anymore. If you know what I mean. I'm old. I'm DVDs and VHS.
Yeah.
Like they started talking. Like, and even I come in here, it's just like, I'm like, nah, that's way too many cables, man. And we just work with at Grafton. I'm working with another ministry that shot a pilot episode for a TV show, and they used us as the pilot. And so those guys came in and just like putting all these. I'm like, oh, it's way too. I'm used to one camera. You see the quality I was used to, but it worked back then because there wasn't. So now it's just and I have so many.
Is that Tyro?
No.
Yeah.
No. This is a ministry out of Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah, and has nothing to do with prisons.
We'll have to talk about that.
He's looking for unique. They're doing a ministry travel show.
Okay.
So it's kind of like one of those food shows where they came in and we were shooting footage by the Goodyear blimp hangar in downtown Cleveland. So they kind of tell this, but then they obviously focused on ministries that have a unique tool a unique tool or approach to get the gospel out. And so
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What's that show called? Or is it a pilot stage right now?
It's called Lit. It's going to be called Lit.
All
and
right.
so it's still
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Cool.
So but anyways, there's a couple and I'm also very hesitant to make deals, right? Because I've made way too many with the devil. And the one of the things that you could probably imagine is just because I'm rolling with Jesus doesn't mean the devil hasn't tried to infiltrate.
Well, I was going to say,
there's been a lot. I've been approached by a lot of people for doing a lot of production companies. And the good thing about me is I know every part about the devil's work in the darkness. So I'll be like considering doing something or working with somebody. but I'm also very patient now too, and I want to honor God and do it right. And so I'll set up meetings, and I just had one not too long ago, and just a couple things that started coming out. I'm like, I'll pass, man. I just know. Like, you know what I mean?
This isn't gonna end well.
No.
Yeah, I could imagine like there's still people that are, you know, chasing down the Starboyz for other reasons. Because I mean, like I said, shame on myself. I didn't realize how national or international you guys had become. Like to me, you guys were like local heroes.
Yeah.
Because at that, I think 2000, I went to the military and I was gone for 6 years, and that was kind of the peak of you guys growing out. But you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are trying to catch up on that and maybe profiteer off of the rise.
Just
and
sign
fall
right
of
here, and you'll be on the next WrestleMania. Come on now.
Yeah,
I was talking
that
about.
would be pretty awesome.
I was just talking. That was part of my message at Grafton on Friday. It's like signing the deal with the what was the Nicolas Cage, the Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
Remember when the devil came in, the pen didn't work, but he pricked him, and the drop of blood hit the paper. And Nicolas Cage is like, it don't work, and it dropped the blood. It showed the drop of blood slow motion entering the contract, and it was Pete Fonda, right? Peter Fonda. He said, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it wasn't signed. No, it was.
If somebody wants to follow you now, what are some social, are you guys using Ride4Life as your social media handle for pretty much everything?
Facebook is Ride4Life with the number 4.
Okay.
I mean, you look it up and it'll pop up on a search. But we do have an Instagram. And then
is that Ride4Life as well?
Yeah, Ride4Life official on Instagram, Ride4Life Ministries on Facebook. And like I said, when you push it up there, on a search engine, it'll bring them up, and there's definitely content up there. So
gotcha.
And it's Ride the number 4
Life. And then you guys on YouTube?
I have a page, but that's what I've been sitting on. That's what I've been
Gotcha.
sitting on.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Well, awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to come on. I know it's almost 11 o'clock at night at this point.
We're all yawning here.
Yeah,
hey, wait a minute. What's that?
Search.
What's that red light blinking right now?
Let me try to do this
It's
again.
been going off for about an hour now. Yeah.
Right.
You're an awesome guest, and it's a tremendous story. Like I said, for myself, it's like very nostalgic when he said
awesome.
that the Starboyz, he knew somebody from the Starboyz, and he's like, no, Scott Caraboolad, and he started the whole thing. I was like, get the fuck out of here. So I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure I know my brother-in-law will probably listen to this because he's familiar with your story, and he's like, oh, I was supposed to ask you about one other thing. If you listen this long, you're in for a real treat. So I heard, and I don't know if you actually knew him at the point in time. Are you a Browns fan?
Oh, I know what it is.
Kellen Winslow, from what I heard, wanted to be the Starboyz Scott. And then he actually fucking totaled his bike a week or two before he hurt his knee.
That was the end of his career.
But he wrecked it before, and then he hurt his knee the week after or something, right? Or did he hurt it previously on the bike, and then he got worse when he got hit on that inside kick or whatever?
He hurt it in the wreck in the Willie.
Yeah.
Right. And
This is Kevin who?
Winslow.
Kellen Winslow.
Kellen.
He was number 7 drafted pick overall. Like his dad played for the Browns, and was like an all-world tight end or all.
And he just blew it because of the.
So
Starboyz.
he was a rookie.
He was a wannabe.
Yeah, he wanted.
It
was a big deal because I think it was his second year. It might have been his rookie year, but I think it was his second year, and all he said was he got in a motorcycle accident in a parking lot. It was like it was very low key. And then the next week or something, he got hit at a football game on his knee, blew out his knee, and he was never the same. Like in his life after that,
it wasn't low key though.
I hope
man,
he found God.
We were on that dog pound. They had a forum.
Oh really?
Oh, they we were getting death threats from the dog pound, like for ruining.
Wow.
But he used to come to our shows, and he was signed up to go through our Willie school because we had a Willie school back in the day. But he had unfortunately. He came from. We did a show at Park Honda down in Canton. He was down there, and once again, it's ego, man. He bought like the biggest, fastest bike, and left that show. And then there was surveillance footage. I don't know if you could still find it, but they had surveillance footage of him in this parking lot. You just see this white R1 going back and forth, and it's not really funny, but it didn't come back one time.
Yeah, I remember when it happened because like everybody was like, "Oh,
But we were actually in Sports Illustrated because of this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Let's see.
But he got in a lot of trouble after that too.
He's got.
He's been-
That's a man who did not find his correct.
He
path.
probably had it pulled down out of embarrassment.
No, he's got way more worse than that now. I mean,
Yeah.
he's. You can see. Let's see. Where's that? Here you go.
Wow.
You guys might have actually preached to him recently.
I wonder where he's at.
I think he's in Texas.
Oh.
Where is? I don't see where he's at. Oh wait, hold on. What channel news is this? I don't know. But yeah, I think rape. I think is what took him down.
Crazy.
That's too bad.
Yeah, but talk about a store. Yeah, he's seeking California.
That is not a place to be locked up. California's awful.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I couldn't. I wouldn't imagine that. What am I thinking? I would think California would be pretty
Rape.
light. You have to do the worst of the
A
worst.
rape
though, to
charge, 14 years in a California prison. Yeah, that's not going to be no fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, my Austin, the guy I was telling you about was he was my brother-in-law. He's like, you gotta ask him about Kellen Winslow.
Yeah.
He's like he wanted to be Starboy Scott.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah.
That's crazy.
But he didn't make
Make the cutoff.
Didn't make the cutoff.
Yeah.
No Starboy Kellen anywhere around. So last thing, what did happen to the Starboys? Is your former partner still operating them, or did they quit?
Yeah,
completely?
like it kind of dissolved. We went. It was a dead corp, like because nothing was filed, nothing was whatever. And when I made my conversion in 14 to 15 to Ride4Life, like I as hard as it was for me to walk from it, I went from like not wanting to walk from like a baby that I launched,
right.
It was, but then like, as soon as I came to terms with it, I was like, I had some elders that were helping advise me and stuff. They're like, give me 4 good reasons why you should keep it. And I couldn't come up with any of them.
So were you still overseeing or in charge and over the LLC at that point in time?
Yeah, so there was originally the LLC that was drafted up, and for some reason my name was the only one that was showing up on that. Like we didn't have any of the documents.
Right.
Like I think we probably threw that thing away as soon as we left the lawyer's office. But so I wanted to get rid of it, and I tried to sell it to my ex-partner for $1, and it just he tried to beat up the guy that I sent to negotiate the deal. Like,
are you serious?
Yeah, it was.
So you guys
crazy.
didn't part best of ways then?
And I parted with love, and I pray for him every day. And,
Yeah.
and he just chose to hate. A lot of those guys from back, like it was not a good breakup. I broke up the band in everybody's eyes, and we were still famous worldwide then, and all this campaign against me like just came. Like I was getting death threats, and like people just like, it was crazy for those 2 years when I finally find peace, and everybody's like, man, you got to get sober, Scott. You're
the
getting
devil
crazy.
sending hate.
Yeah, and it flares up like a hemorrhoid every once in a while. Like they just come out of the blue and start bashing us and stuff like that. But I know how to cope with it now.
How many
This
writers-
podcast isn't going to help.
Yeah.
How many?
That's why I don't even like to mention the names.
Yeah.
But they
That's all right.
they
I mean,
mentioned
you were
mentioned mine.
respectful.
They mentioned mine over and over. They started like it just the whole Starboy thing revived like a year ago. Like a couple of the guys that were involved throughout the years just.
Oh, so they kind of some of the guys that were on the back burner kind of
But corporate wise, like
well, I was gonna say they can't take the name, right?
No, it was never transferred, and I've had some of my guys look it up, and just because we wanted to see where and it's just kind of, it's not ironic. It's in like this gray area, like there's not much to be found on it.
Yeah,
I don't think there's much to be done with it. Like it's just even when we were drafting up to try to sell it, it was just like trying to just push all the liability off of it away from me,
right.
Going into the future. So, and I've had people approach me about, reviving it or doing, I'm like, nope, done with it. But although, that we are in the works of, autobiography about my life and potentially a documentary. Which, once again, it's
Hopefully, you got some great footage from all those wild parties because that's what makes a documentary.
Well, it's gonna really depend on who's doing the documentary and for what purpose. If you're doing it with the message, the ultimate message for Christ, then
I would never let it go otherwise.
I know.
Not in my, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the whole thing. It's the same thing we just talked about, the trifecta.
Right.
The Starboyz, the downfall, and the Ride4Life.
Awesome.
You know, and it's all glory to God, right?
Yeah.
The only reason we talk about the past and our stories is to direct people to come out of it.
Well, people want to hear where it came from, right?
Yeah.
Because like
It's important.
I mean, it's people still think of the Starboyz. They don't know any of this behind any of this
right.
stuff,
And
right?
this is stuff that people want to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I think that's people that one, you got the haters who are like, down with them. They were so good,
Right.
making millions, riding bikes, and then you had the others that like just thought you were living the best of life and didn't realize the demons that you were facing on the backside, and that, you know, hopefully there's we talk about it every podcast. If anything's said during one show that helps one person find light in any way in their life,
Right.
then like it's a win for all men of all kinds. So
Amen.
we appreciate you being on, Rich.
Hey,
appreciate you
I
connecting us.
want to let
You got one
him
thing
know
there?
one more thing, and that is that I'm proud of you, brother.
Hell yeah.
You know, for a former millionaire celebrity to be able to go into a prison and teach men without like a high paycheck to do it,
Right.
that takes heart. And that,
Just to come on a fucking podcast
Right.
called
Well,
Guys Night with some guy in his basement, man. I mean,
I just want you
hell
to
yeah.
know I'm proud of you, brother. Keep up the good work.
Every topic under the sun, with honor and valor, every man's battle begun. Warriors with words soars through